What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back for another Game of Thrones video. Now that it's a new year, I'm sure we will be getting some Winds of Winter and House of the Dragon updates very soon, so make sure you're on the lookout for those. In the meantime, I want to go back to Game of Thrones Season 8. As you all know, the ending to Game of Thrones essentially split the fandom right down the middle. What I want to do in this video is basically rewrite the entire final season. Over a year ago, before Season 8 was released, I read several different outlines and plot leaks on my channel. And just like with the final season, some of you did like them and some of you hated them. Now, when you consider what Dan and Dave and HBO actually gave us for their final season, some of those leaks and outlines were actually far superior than what we got. So what I went ahead and did was gathered up some of those ideas that I think make for a much better season. I also sprinkled in some of my own theories, of course, so feel free to let me know what you think down below. So, without further ado, let's begin. Now, as you all know, the very first episode of Game of Thrones began at Castle Black with the introduction of the Night's Watch as well as the White Walkers. I want to do the exact same thing with the final season. I want to begin at Castle Black. If you remember, Season 7 ended with the Night King knocking down the wall at Eastwatch by the Sea. During the White Walkers' invasion, Beric Dondarrion and Tormund Giantsbane were able to escape from that attack. So, the very first episode of my final season will begin with Beric and Tormund arriving at Castle Black to inform everyone of what happened at Eastwatch. Immediately after they relay the information, we will see several men from the Night's Watch begin to send out ravens to inform everyone about the breakthrough at Eastwatch by the Sea. Right as we are watching some of these ravens fly away from Castle Black, we will hear the sound of their horn blow 3 times, signaling that the army of the dead are there. At that moment, Beric Dondarrion will tell Tormund Giantsbane to take a horse and head south for Winterfell while Beric stays at Castle Black with Lord Commander Ed and the rest of the remaining members of the Night's Watch. We can still see all the ravens flying with their messages from Castle Black, but right as they're almost out of frame, we see the Night King's dragon burn them all before their messages can ever make it south to all the other houses. This is when Beric shouts, "Not all of the dead are coming to Castle Black." We can see that the army of the dead have split up. Only a few hundred whites are running for Castle Black, while the Night King, his dragon, and the rest of his army are heading south for much bigger targets. Then, the few hundred whites reach Castle Black and the battle begins. You see, one of the many reasons why fans were so disappointed with Season 8 was because of how the Night King's story ended. We waited 8 seasons for them to get through the wall, and then as soon as they did, they all died during their first battle at Winterfell. Well, that's not about to happen in my version of the events. As you can see, the final season opens with an attack from the dead, just like the first season opened with their introduction. This will set the tone for the entire season. Winter is here, ladies and gentlemen, as well as the Night King and his army of the dead. Now let's go to the next scene. Another thing that was very disappointing about the final season was how Bran Stark's abilities were underutilized to say the least. I mean, let's be honest, Bran barely did anything at all. Well, that's not going to happen in my version of the events either. This scene begins with Bran Stark sitting in the Godswood next to the weirwood tree. We see Bran's eyes go from white back to normal. He looks over at the Maester and says, "How long was I gone?" The Maester says, "I'm not sure. Maybe a few hours?" Bran says he has not seen anything this time. He may have been thrown out of a vision, similar to how he was thrown out of the ravens when the Night King noticed he was watching him. Bran also says something must have gone wrong. Bran then signals to the Maester to help him back to the courtyard. Bran says, "They are here." Now we get our big arrival scene with Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen. Only in my version, this scene's not going to go on forever and ever. Jon, Daenerys, Jorah, Tyrion, Varys, Brienne, the Hound, and some soldiers arrive inside the main courtyard of Winterfell. Jorah Mormont immediately notices Sansa and some of the other Northerners are looking at Daenerys suspiciously. They already let us know how they felt about Dany last season. Tyrion Lannister looks around and notices they are already reinforcing the walls of Winterfell. We then see Jon and Sansa embrace each other first. She wants to know how they were able to get Cersei to agree to send her armies north, which Tyrion then shows a half smirk and bows his head. Sansa looks a bit surprised, as if she doesn't believe it. Then we see Jon embrace Bran. It's a very similar reunion as to the one we got in the show. Jon looks very concerned by Bran's lack of emotion. Sansa says Bran's situation is hard to explain, but he has visions now. Jon looks like he wants to say something, but then he notices Arya. And I have to be honest, the reunion Jon and Arya had during Season 8 was a bit underwhelming for me, which was very disappointing because it was the one I was looking forward to the most. Out of all the Stark children, I believe they have the closest relationship. At least in the books, they are both constantly thinking about each other, and I was hoping that would come across when they finally reunited again. But for whatever reason, it just wasn't as emotional as I was hoping. So I would try to fix that in my version of the final season. Now we know that Jon did ask her about Needle, the sword that he had given her before he left, but this time I would have Arya mention something about just how much the sword has meant to her. As you all know, Arya was willing to kill other characters over that sword. It has also saved her life on many occasions. Not to mention, when Arya was training at the House of Black and White, she had to get rid of all her personal belongings to help enable her to strip away from her former identity. However, Needle was the one thing she could never let go of. Arya can never fully become no one because she cannot allow herself to get rid of the sword, and most importantly, forget about her family and life as a Stark. Needle was not only a gift from Jon, but it also represented who she was and where she was from. So, when we see Jon ask Arya about Needle, I want her to express this to Jon in some way. Afterwards, we can have Sansa and Daenerys meet for the first time, then Sansa can tell Dany, Winterfell is yours, your grace. We can also see Sam, Gilly, and the baby standing across the courtyard. Ghost is sitting right next to them. After Sansa and Dany meet, Jon's gonna ask Sansa, where's Littlefinger? If you remember, Jon nearly killed Littlefinger in the crypts right before he left Winterfell. Right as Sansa begins to tell him, Arya cuts her off and says, I executed him. Jon is shocked by that information. He knew Littlefinger was a shady character, but he never could have imagined Arya would be the executioner. Jon now knows Arya's no longer the same little sister he grew up with. But before Jon can even let all the new information sink in, he's then greeted by Sam and Ghost. Jon's gonna bend down and scratch Ghost right behind the ears, while Sam begins to ask Jon about the dragonglass from Dragonstone. Jon will thank him for sending the information about where the dragonglass could be located. Then he's gonna ensure all of them that there is more than enough dragonglass to arm everyone in the north. We then see Tyrion walk over to Sansa and ask her how she was able to escape from King's Landing during Joffrey's death. She says Littlefinger was behind it. Littlefinger has been behind almost everything. He helped her escape from King's Landing, but he was also the one who helped murder Joffrey, as well as their Aunt Lysa, Jon Arryn, and many others. Jon wonders, how does Sansa know all of this? Did Littlefinger admit it before his execution? Sansa's gonna look over to Bran and say, I told you, he has visions. Jon will look over to Bran with a very surprised look on his face. Bran, of course, is sitting there emotionless. Jon says it's time for all of us to gather inside the main hall. We need to prepare for the wars to come. Inside the main hall, Jon can see the look on everyone's face as Daenerys takes her seat at the main table. The very first thing he does is remind everyone the king in the north has bent the knee and is now serving Daenerys Targaryen. Jon Royce stands up and says, why haven't you learned from the mistakes of your uncle, Brandon Stark, and your grandfather? The Targaryens cannot be trusted. Jon angrily shouts back at him, Daenerys has came here to save us. Not only has she given us as much dragonglass as we could possibly need, but she has also brought her own armies as well as her dragons. Jon also says, she has already helped me fight the dead, despite how dangerous that was. She even sacrificed one of her dragons to do so. What have you sacrificed, Lord Royce? Lord Glover rises to his feet and says, I have not seen any of this for myself. Bran Stark says, I have seen it. They are telling the truth. Daenerys finally stands and says, I'm not here to slaughter the North. I will help you defeat the Night King, and then we will go down south and defeat Cersei Lannister together. Lyanna Mormont says, how was it that you were able to get Cersei to agree to send her men to help you, knowing she's going to need those men later to defeat you? Arya Stark follows this up with, we cannot trust Cersei Lannister. She lied to save herself. She's not going to be sending any of her men to help us. Tyrion Lannister has a concerned look on his face. We then see Samwell whisper to Bran. He says, when are you going to tell Jon the truth? He needs to know. Bran will say, not right now. The tension in the room is already high. Jon Snow will then walk to the center of the room and say, I will not force anyone to stay here and fight the dead, but if you do stay, and we somehow survive, we will go to war for Daenerys Targaryen because it's obvious she is here to go to war for us. So, whoever is staying here to fight, need to have all of their men get to Winterfell. All of the northern lords and ladies begin to discuss their options. Some of them still seem to be undecided about what to do. This is when Bran Stark says, we do not have time to argue. The dead do not argue. In fact, the dead do not speak. They follow one king, the Night King. I know many of you may not believe me, but I have seen them. I first met the Night King in a vision, then he found me in the far north. He has left his mark on me, which Bran shows the entire room the Night King's mark on his arm. Bran then looks at Daenerys and says, he has also left his mark on your dragon, and now your dragon fights for him. This silences the entire room. Daenerys appears as if she is about to cry. Bran ends the discussion by saying, the Night King and his army are now south of the wall, and they are heading this way. Join us in this fight, otherwise everyone you know and love will die. Now we go down to King's Landing, and I'm also going to start this scene off by having Qyburn reveal to Cersei that the wall has fallen and the dead are moving south. Cersei will have the same reaction as she did during Season 8, but Qyburn is also going to inform her of something else. He will say, what he has been working on is near completion, and that Cersei should come see it for herself. They will walk through the Great Hall until they reach one of the back rooms. Once inside, they will go down a ladder to a cellar that's in complete darkness, except for a faint glow of green that can be seen for nearly 100 yards. We can see that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of pots of wildfire stored right underneath the throne room. Qyburn then says there's more stashed all over the city. He implies that he has been working non-stop on producing an unlimited supply of wildfire since the explosion of the Septa Baelor was so successful. As Cersei and Qyburn begin to leave the cellar, we go outside, where we see Euron's fleet arriving in the Blackwater Bay. There are hundreds of ships filled with Golden Company soldiers. We can see that some of them are already unloading the cargo. There are hundreds of war horses, as well as dozens of elephants fitted with body armor. This is the Golden Company we should have seen during the final season. Harry Strickland and Euron Greyjoy begin to have a conversation. Harry Strickland wants to know, does Daenerys Targaryen actually have full-grown dragons? He's heard about them, yet he has never seen them for himself. Euron assures him, Daenerys does indeed have dragons, but they have something to defeat them. As they walk to the back of the Silence, Euron uncovers one of the largest ballistas we have ever seen. In the next scene, Jaime Lannister meets with Bronn at an undisclosed location. Before he left King's Landing, Jaime sent word to Bronn to meet him somewhere along the road to the north. He tells Bronn he's leaving King's Landing and Cersei for good. He intends on keeping his word to Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen, and if Bronn wants to survive the winter and get what is owed to him, he would be advised to join forces with them as well. Bronn does not appear to be happy, but he does agree to follow Jaime. Back in the north, Jon Snow is down below in the crypts of Winterfell. Similar to the scene in Season 8, Daenerys walks down there to be with Jon. When she stands beside him, she will ask, how many family members has he lost during the recent wars? Jon will talk about Ned, Catelyn, Robb, and Rickon. He tells her about how Rickon died right in front of him during the battle for Winterfell. He will tell her about how Robb was betrayed by some of his own men. Jon says, unfortunately, his mistakes led to his own death. This may or may not be foreshadowing. Jon says Robb was set to marry a woman, but he chose another, and it cost him his life. Daenerys then walks from Ned's statue over to Lyanna's. She says she hasn't noticed any other statues of a woman down here. She must have been loved by many. Jon says she was my aunt, Lyanna, which is interesting because we all know Daenerys is actually Jon's aunt. Jon looks at Dany and says she was abducted by your brother, Rhaegar Targaryen. Daenerys says she has heard the story many times. She says she never understood why Rhaegar would do such a thing, because everyone always told her about how Rhaegar was a good man and loved by many. Abducting a woman does not sound like something he would do. Jon looks kinda sad, and he says it really doesn't matter now. They're both dead and there's nothing we can do to change that. Then, as we see Jon and Daenerys walking back out of the crypts, they notice some commotion happening at the main gate. Jon can see that it's Tormund Giantsbane, who nearly collapses as he gets off his horse. The horse appears to be ready to collapse as well. It's obvious they have been riding non-stop through the night and day. Tormund Giantsbane is very distressed. He tells Jon about what happened at Eastwatch by the Sea and Castle Black. He confirms the Night King does have the dragon, and he will be heading their way. Winterfell is now on high alert. Tyrion Lannister is watching all of this from above. We then follow him inside the castle and down one of the hallways. He enters his own chamber and closes the door behind him. We see him begin to write a letter, but we don't know who he is writing that letter to. In the final scene of the episode, we see a small boy working outside in the snow with his father. After watching them for a few moments, the boy suddenly stops. The father will ask him what's wrong. The boy will motion to the nearby forest. It's getting very dark outside, so we don't notice anything at first, but then we begin to see blue eyes staring back at us. Before we know it, there are hundreds of blue eyes moving through the woods. The father tells his son, run inside and tell the others. A horn begins to blow as hundreds of whites begin to run straight for the father standing outside. Little Ned Umber, who is followed by several soldiers, begin to rush outside to defend the castle. As hundreds of soldiers begin to rush outside, the sound of a dragon begins to drown out the sound of the horns that were blowing. One of the soldiers tries to get Ned Umber to run back inside, but it's already too late. Thousands of whites, led by White Walkers and giants, are now just a few feet away. Then, the Night King appears through the clouds, and Viserion begins unleashing his blue flame on the castle. Chaos erupts, and every man, woman, and child begin to get butchered simultaneously. Viserion's blue flame delivers a devastating blow that completely destroys the Umber's ancestral home. Ned Umber's personal guard is butchered within seconds, leaving him all alone on the field. One of the White Walkers approaches him, and with one swift move, he pierces his heart with the ice sword. Ned Umber falls, as we see the Night King landing his dragon. We can now see there are almost 100 White Walkers walking across the blood-soaked battlefield. Every man, woman, and child lay slain at their feet. We get a close-up of the Night King as he raises his arms. Then the episode's gonna end with us knowing what's about to happen next. The opening scene of the second episode will begin in the north at Winterfell. Davos, Gendry, and the remaining forces arrive at the main gate. They agreed to stay behind with the ship so they can unload all the dragonglass from Dragonstone, then escort it to Winterfell. They have about a dozen big wagons filled with dragonglass. Most of the wagons are full of black obsidian, but we can also see there is a wagon full of green and red dragonglass. Once again, we can see Arya and Brienne outside training in the courtyard as the wagons are arriving at the main gate. They are interrupted as all the wagons are being brought inside to the center of the courtyard. This is when Arya and Gendry will notice each other from across the yard. Neither one of them can believe what they are seeing because they never thought they would actually see each other again. Arya and Gendry meet in the middle of the courtyard where they embrace each other for several moments. With a big smile on her face, Arya says, "I cannot believe you're here. I did not trust that Red Witch. I thought she was taking you away to murder you." And Gendry says, "She wanted to sacrifice me." This is when Gendry looks over at Davos, who is helping unload the wagons of dragonglass, and says, "I would not be alive if it were not for him." Then Gendry says, "Thanks to the Red Woman, I found out why the Goldcloaks wanted me so bad. I am Robert Baratheon's bastard son. That's why the Goldcloaks wanted me, and that's why the Red Woman wanted me. I have king's blood." Arya looks stunned for a few moments, then she says, "You know, I wanted to kill the Red Witch for taking you away. I used to recite her name every night before I would fall asleep." Gendry smiles, then Arya says, "If I ever see Melisandre again," but before she can finish her sentence, Davos cuts her off as he walks over and says, "I will kill her myself." This will be a nice segue right into my next scene. In Volantis, we see there is a large group of followers gathered right outside the Red Temple of R'hllor. Melisandre, Kinvara, and several other high-ranking members are standing at the top of the steps overlooking the crowd. This is when Melisandre will say, "There is a darkness falling over Westeros, and soon it could cover us all. The Lord of Light has brought all of us here for one purpose and one purpose only, to end that darkness." Kinvara walks forward and says, "Melisandre has already brought ice and fire together. I believe Daenerys Targaryen is the one who will lead us through this darkness, but Melisandre says there is another." Then, Melisandre says, "I have already seen it in the flames. Whenever I look for the answers from our Lord of Light, all I can see is snow. Daenerys Targaryen has her own part to play, but Jon Snow will be the one who defeats the Night King." Kinvara says, "Prince or princess, it doesn't matter. Melisandre's right. The Great Other is here to bring the darkness to us all. We must go to Westeros and help them. All of us." In the next scene, we will go to Castle Black, where we will see the aftermath of the attack from the Army of the Dead. Castle Black is now in ruins, but there are some survivors from that attack. Lord Commander Ed, as well as 95% of the remaining members of the Night's Watch are dead, but Beric Dondarrion and a few others are still alive. We will see Beric Dondarrion begin to burn all the whites with his flaming sword. Beric Dondarrion will then say he has to ride south right away. He also says He made a promise to someone that he would see them again. He has yet to serve his final purpose. If you remember at the end of Season 7, Beric did say to another character they would meet again, so we shall see. Now let's go to another scene. Back in Winterfell, Bran Stark is sitting alone in the Godswood next to the weirwood tree. We can see that his hands are gripping the chair, as his eyes are fluttering back and forth in his head. Then we will be thrust into a series of visions Bran Stark is having. We see Jaime Lannister taking off his helmet during the first time we saw him arriving at Winterfell. We see Ned Stark's statue in the crypts of Winterfell. We see and hear the Mad King saying, "Burn them all." We see the stash of wildfire underneath King's Landing. We see blue dragonfire burning a castle that's covered in snow. We can see a bed covered in blood. We see Bran Stark falling from the broken tower. We see smoke rising from Winterfell. We see Melisandre looking into the flames. We see a black silhouette of someone standing on a battlefield holding a burning sword in their hand. We can hear the sound of a baby crying inside of a tower. Then, Bran will see himself standing face to face with the Night King, and this immediately throws him out of the vision. As we get closer to the end, and the Night King gets closer to Winterfell, their connection and their powers will continue to grow stronger and stronger. When Bran Stark looks up, we see he is surrounded by Jon, Davos, Daenerys, Sansa, and Arya. They all want to know what Bran has seen. Bran says, "Everything. I can see everything." At first, it was all fragments, making it very hard to decipher what was past, present, or even future events. But now he knows. Bran says Castle Black is gone, along with its men. The last hearth is gone, along with all the Umber's men. Then, Bran says, "I saw the Night King." He knows we're all here. He will be here soon. Jon tells everyone to meet him in the main hall. Bran grabs Jon by his arm, right as he's about to walk away. Bran says, "We need to speak soon. It's finally time you know the truth." This gets the attention of Daenerys and Sansa. They're both wondering what Bran meant by that. Everyone of importance is gathered inside the main hall of Winterfell. Jon Snow informs everyone of the recent attacks in the north by the Night King. Everyone in the room is silent. Jon says Cersei Lannister has yet to send us any additional soldiers to fight the army of the dead, but with or without her, they have to prepare for what's to come. They will need to reinforce all the walls of the castle. They will need to hand out dragonglass weapons to every man, woman, and child at Winterfell. Jon says, "The castle should not fall. My father always said 500 men could hold Winterfell against 10,000. If the castle should fall, there are secret passageways below the ground that could help them escape from the north, but let's hope it doesn't come to that." Then Jon holds up Longclaw for everyone to see. He says this sword is made of Valyrian steel. I have already defeated several White Walkers with this sword. They have control over the army of the dead, and the Night King has control over them. If we can take out the White Walkers and the Night King, we might be able to defeat the entire army. I will go for as many White Walkers as I can with Longclaw, but I'm gonna need your help. This is when Arya and Brienne will stand up at the same time. They both mention they also have Valyrian steel weapons, and they will stand by Jon to help him defeat the White Walkers and the Night King. Samwell Tarly stands up as well. He informs Jon about his father's sword, Heartsbane. Sam also says he has been reading some of the old books that he took from the Citadel. He says he may have found some information that may be of interest. Tyrion Lannister will shift in his seat. He looks to Samwell and says, "I would like to see those books as well." As everyone begins to leave the hall, Daenerys tells Jon she would like to speak with him alone. Sansa looks at Daenerys suspiciously, as does Tyrion Lannister. Jon and Daenerys then walk atop the castle overlooking the battlements. Daenerys wants to know when Jon's going to tell everyone about their relationship. Jon doesn't think that's a good idea right now, considering how many of the Northern Lords and Ladies still do not trust Daenerys. He doesn't need anyone to lose focus or abandon their cause right before the army of the dead arrive. They should wait until after the battle is over. We can't afford to lose anyone right now. It doesn't look like Cersei is sending us any of her soldiers. We already lost the Night's Watch and the Umbers. Let's discuss this again after the battle. Right as Jon begins to walk away, Daenerys says, "Wait, there's one more thing. I spoke to your maester last night. I told him I haven't been feeling very well lately, and he decided to examine me to see what the issue could be." Jon looks nervous. He says, "Is everything okay? What's the matter?" After a long silence, Daenerys says, "Jon, I'm pregnant." Now let's go to another scene. Jaime and Bronn arrive at the twins. The castle looks nearly abandoned now. Jaime says, "Someone infiltrated their castle, killed Walder Frey, and almost every other loyal man to House Frey." Bronn notices that no one is guarding their bridge. Jaime says, "If only Robb Stark would have found their bridge this way. He would still be alive, and I would most likely be dead." Bronn slaps Jaime on the shoulder and says, "If only dreams came true." When Jaime and Bronn reach the castle doors, they are greeted by several of the Frey daughters who are now in charge of the twins. Jaime says we are now heading north, and he needs to gather any soldiers or men that they have available. There is a storm coming down from the wall, and everyone will die unless they follow him north. One of the Frey girls says, "Queen Cersei did not inform us of this. Why did we not receive a raven?" Jaime says, "She sent me instead." Speaking of Cersei Lannister, we go back to King's Landing in the next scene. Cersei, Qyburn, and the Mountain are walking around the walls of the Red Keep. Qyburn has men bringing up the stashes of wildfire to place at each gate that enters the city, along with many other locations. No one will enter through any of the city gates without getting burned alive. We can also see they are strategically setting up large ballistas all around the city. King's Landing will not fall as easily as it did during Season 8. Cersei says Daenerys Targaryen may have the larger army right now, but we shall see how large that army is after the dead get through with them. Cersei vows that Daenerys will never step foot inside the Red Keep while she is still alive. Cersei also says, even if we lose, we have seen what fire does to the army of the dead. With the amount of wildfire we have, I'm not concerned with anyone or anything taking over the city while I'm here. Now that I have the Iron Bank's full support, I may have one other surprise for our Dragon Queen. The next scene takes place in the middle of the night. Theon Greyjoy and his small team of men land their boats on the shore of the Iron Islands and make their way up to the castle. Theon is hoping his sister Yara is being kept captive there. He wants to free Yara before Euron eventually has her killed. But, to their surprise, the Iron Islands are completely abandoned. There isn't even anyone there guarding the castle. Euron has taken every able body to fight with him, and those who could not fight were put to the blade. Yara's not there. Theon's worst fear has come true. Yara's still in the Silence, and in order to set her free, Theon's gonna have to board that wicked ship. Now let's go to the next scene. This time we go to Dragonstone. We can see Euron's entire fleet is scattered around the island. Now that Daenerys has taken all of her men north, Euron's men, along with the Golden Company, were able to easily secure the castle for Cersei Lannister. On board the Silence, we go down below where we can see Yara Greyjoy. She's covered in blood, and it looks like most of her hair has been chopped off. Euron Greyjoy enters the cabin, and he begins laughing like a maniac right in Yara's face. He informs Yara that she's not going to make it off his ship alive, and he assures her that Theon's never going to have the balls to try to get her back, and even if he did, he's going to hang both of them from the front of the Silence. Then, he leans down and whispers, "Tell me, my sweet niece, who is your king?" Yara doesn't say a word, but she does not break eye contact. For a few moments, it's silent. Then Euron begins laughing like a maniac again, and he throws something that bounces off of Yara's face. We soon find out why Yara hasn't said a word. Euron has hit Yara with her own tongue, which he had chopped off almost immediately after her capture. Now we go back to Winterfell where Jon, Daenerys, Bran, Sam, Tyrion, and the Maester are looking over everything he took from the Citadel. They're hoping they can find out some more information about how to defeat the Night King. Sam says he has several books and scrolls about the Long Night, the White Walkers, and the Children of the Forest, and many others. The only problem is he's having trouble making sense of it all. Bran Stark says, "Show me what you found, then perhaps I can go back and have a look for myself." Tyrion Lannister grabs one of the books that is already open. This one has legends about the Long Night, and he begins to read it aloud. It has information about a legendary figure known as Azor Ahai, who carried a burning sword called Lightbringer. Tyrion looks over at Jon and Daenerys and says, "This reminds me of what Melisandre said to us on Dragonstone. Melisandre said the prince who was promised will bring the dawn, but Missandei believes it could mean the prince or princess who will bring the dawn. This Azor Ahai figure sounds like a man." Bran Stark says, "Old Nan used to tell me bedtime stories about a last hero who would lead the fight against the dead." Then, the Maester cuts in and says, "Well, where do you suppose we find such a man with a magical burning sword?" Sam immediately looks over at Jon. Jon says, "Longclaw's Valyrian steel, but it does not burn." Jon looks over to Bran and says, "What do you think this could mean?" Bran says, "I need to go to the Godswood." In the final scene of the episode, we will see a massive storm begin to roll in from the north. Everyone in the area begins to go indoors. The location of the castle is revealed when we see the Karstark banners hanging by the main gate. Elise Karstark is inside with a few of her household guards. She's sitting by the fire, reading some of the messages the Ravens brought in for the day. She says, "Word has arrived from Winterfell. Castle Black and the Last Hearth no longer stand. The Night King and the army of the dead may be on their way to Winterfell next. They inform us that we should all get to Winterfell as soon as we can. They say we should prepare for the worst." Before she can finish telling her men about the news from Winterfell, a sudden scream and the sound of a horn begin to echo through the castle. Elise Karstark runs over to the window to have a look outside to see where the scream came from. To her surprise, she cannot see anything. Now it's a complete whiteout from the storm. Then, all of a sudden, a thunderous scream comes from the clouds above. The Night King and Viserion suddenly appear through the storm. The episode ends as a blue flame can be seen lighting up the night sky. We now know House Karstark will also be added to the army of the dead. This episode will begin with us getting a glimpse of the aftermath of that attack. There is smoke rising from a mound of stone, which is where the castle once stood. We can see that there are acres and acres of snow-covered land soaked in blood. There's also remnants of northern uniforms all over the ground, as well as broken weapons. This looks like your typical battlefield, the only difference is there are no dead bodies. We know the Night King has risen them all to fight in his army, and they're most likely heading to Winterfell, which is where we will have our next scene. Back in Winterfell, we will see hundreds of northern men preparing the Stark's castle for the coming storm. Outside of the main gate of the castle, we will see them making trenches that appear to be a moat. Just like in Season 8, I want to enclose the castle in a ring of fire that will prevent the dead from entering Winterfell. I actually talked about this idea in one of my videos before the final season came out. We're also going to see hundreds of archers on standby, all along the top of the wall of the castle. All of their arrows are made of dragonglass. There's also going to be barrels of these arrows all along the top of the castle walls as well. Down in the courtyard, there are thousands of spears made up of dragonglass too. However, Grey Worm's spear will look slightly different than the rest. His will be made with the red dragonglass. We're also going to see that Gendry has made himself a new hammer out of dragonglass, and there will be different spikes coming off the hammer. Each of the spikes will be made up of different colored dragonglass, one black, one red, and one green. Jon, Sansa, Arya, and Ghost are walking around the courtyard overlooking all the work getting done to their home. Arya mentions how she came across Nymeria on her way to Winterfell. Arya tells Jon, "I did want her to come home with me, but deep down I knew that she was meant to be free." She hopes that one day she's going to be able to see her again. As Jon looks over at Ghost, you can see that he has a sad look on his face, realizing that Ghost is the only direwolf left in the far north. Jon talks about the day they were found and how he told Ned they were meant to have them. He also says, as long as they're alive, they're always going to have a connection to one another, no matter how much distance is in between them. This brings a smile to Arya's face, and Jon says even at times when him and Ghost were separated, he would always have a sense that he was still with him. And Arya says, "I have also felt that with Nymeria." They are interrupted when one of the guards at the main gate begins to shout that a rider is approaching the castle. Beric Dondarrion has arrived from Castle Black. Beric looks like he's about to collapse, as Jon tells the guards to open the gate and allow him inside. As soon as Arya recognizes who it is, she draws out her dagger. Arya lets Beric know right away that he is not welcome, and Jon looks somewhat confused. Arya says Beric sold Gendry to Melisandre, knowing full well that the Red Witch wanted to sacrifice him. Beric Dondarrion will say, "Kill me if you must, but I'm here to play my part in the Great War." Then Beric looks at Jon and says, "The Night King and the army of the dead will be here tonight." The next scene is in King's Landing. It begins with Euron Greyjoy greeting Cersei Lannister. Euron says, "I have completed every mission you have set upon me. I have traveled the seas, conquered your enemies, and even brought you the Golden Company." Cersei says, "You haven't defeated all of my enemies, but maybe it is time you are rewarded." Euron smiles, then the commander of the Golden Company greets Cersei. He talks about how good it feels to be in Westeros. Cersei reminds him not to get too comfortable. They still have a war to win. Harry Strickland then wishes to speak to whoever commands Cersei Lannister's soldiers. He wants to discuss their strategy. Cersei informs him that she is in the process of finding someone she can trust, who can command her Lannister men. Her former commander and brother has left the city for good. She says he went to go join his traitor brother, the bastard in the north, and the foreign whore with the dragons. Cersei then says, but it doesn't matter now. I have everything I need right here. Euron has a very big smile come across his face, even though Cersei wasn't just talking about him. We also see Cersei notice the look on Harry Strickland's face as the dragons were mentioned. She can tell he's very nervous about those dragons. So Cersei says, what's wrong? Are you afraid of dragons? Harry says he wasn't entirely sure they were even real. He's heard about them for quite some time, yet he has never seen them for himself. Afterwards, Euron Greyjoy wishes to speak with Cersei alone. The scene ends as Cersei says, as you wish. Back in Winterfell, Bran, Jon, Daenerys, Sam, Tyrion, and the Maester are shown in the Godswood. Tyrion Lannister says there must be someone or something that has a connection to all the different legends about the Long Night. As we saw in the last episode, the book about the Long Night talks of Azor Ahai. Melisandre talks about the prince who was promised, and Old Nan used to speak of the last hero during her bedtime stories. In all these different stories, it is said that these legendary figures have faced the darkness and won. Sam looks over at Bran and says, we need you to go back and see if there's anything you can tell us about this man. Who was he? How did he defeat the White Walkers? We need answers. Bran Stark will take a deep breath, then his eyes will roll back in his head. He's about to see another series of visions. Some's going to take place in the past, some in the present, and even the future. This time, the very first thing he sees is a black silhouette, standing alone on a battlefield, holding a burning red sword. It's very similar to his last vision of the shadowy figure, only this time, the man is standing face to face with the Night King. Then Bran will see the same battlefield, but now no one is there, and all the snow is gone. Bran Stark is walking across that battlefield, then he sees a man face down in the water. He can also see there are some red rubies scattered all across the water. Then he begins to see a crowd of people cheering. There is a man mounted on a horse, and he leans down and hands something to a girl who looks a lot like his sister Arya. Then Bran is at the wall. There is a lot of blood covering the snow. When Bran looks into the blood, he can see blue rose petals scattered throughout it, soaking up the blood. Now Bran is back at the Tower of Joy, but this time he can see Lyanna is sitting up in the bed, talking to a man with hair so blonde that it almost looks silver. Bran knows it's Rhaegar, and he can hear him say, our son has a song, and it is the Song of Ice and Fire. Bran then sees a woman dressed in red, with hair as red as a bleeding star. It appears as if this woman is talking to someone, but Bran can't quite make out the man's face. It sounds like Jon's voice, but all he can see is a black silhouette, with smoke rising from the sword. Then, all of a sudden, Bran is back on the battlefield that is now covered in snow. Once again, Bran can see the figure that looks like a black silhouette, with a burning sword clenched in his fist. This time, he's standing face to face with the Night King. Right as Bran sees the Night King take a step forward, the black shadowy figure swings his sword as fast as lightning strikes. When Bran opens his eyes, we can see that he is completely covered in sweat, with steam coming off his body. Everyone else that's in the Godswood are silently staring at Bran, anxiously awaiting to find out what he has seen. Tyrion says, are the legends real? After a few moments of silence, Sam says, do you know what we need to do to defeat the Night King? After a few more moments of silence, Bran finally says yes. Now it all makes sense. I finally understand what the three-eyed raven was trying to show me. Sam says, what? What is it? The scene ends as Bran looks over at Jon. Back in King's Landing, Cersei, the Mountain, and Euron Greyjoy enter her private chambers. Euron immediately says he wants the Mountain to leave so they can speak alone, but Cersei says don't worry, he won't say a thing. Euron begins by telling Cersei it's time that he gets what is owed, which we all know he wants Cersei herself. Euron then starts bragging about how he's a better man than Jaime, and how Jaime won't ever be coming back to King's Landing unless his head is on a spike. Cersei does agree, but she continues to play hard to get. However, Euron does eventually get Cersei to start to soften up a bit. Cersei knows exactly what Euron wants, but she tells him she's already pregnant with Jaime's child inside of her. Euron says he doesn't care if she's pregnant. He says all he's ever wanted was to marry the most beautiful woman in the Seven Kingdoms, which is why he's here. He's a king who deserves to have a queen at his side. They should rule Westeros together. And he also says he's never going to betray her or abandon her in a time of need. Cersei does enjoy the attention she's getting from him, but she isn't quite ready to just hand over the keys to her kingdom. She does, however, assure him that he will get everything he wants in due time. Cersei then motions for the Mountain to step outside. Cersei closes the door behind him, then takes Euron by the hand and walks them over to the bed. In the next scene, we go back to Winterfell where we see Jon pushing Bran across the courtyard. Bran says it's time that him and Jon go speak alone. They begin to make their way to the crypts of Winterfell, but then they notice some of the guards shouting down from atop the castle wall. One of the guards yells to Jon and says there are more riders approaching the main gate. This time there are hundreds and maybe even thousands. Once again, Bran's gonna have to wait to talk to Jon. Before Jon can even ask who's approaching, some of the guards begin to pick up their weapons and draw back their bows. He can hear everyone shouting. This sends everyone in the courtyard into a frenzy. Then we begin to hear some of the guards shouting the word Kingslayer, with many other curse words to follow. Jaime, Bronn, and the soldiers they were able to gather have finally arrived. They were able to find roughly 1,000 men who were still scattered throughout the Riverlands. Tyrion does seem to be surprised that Jaime's in Winterfell not wearing the Lannister colors. He also notices none of the men with him are from the Lannister army. Something has obviously gone wrong. Jaime and Bronn are greeted with zero courtesy. Sansa wants to know what the hell's happening. Why is Jaime here with soldiers from House Frey? The Northerners are very angry, some of which who are still shouting Kingslayer, the North remembers, etc. Jon Snow attempts to quiet everyone down. He says to Jaime, "Where are the Lannister soldiers Cersei said she would send?" Before Jaime can even answer, Sansa motions to Jaime's sword and says, "That was Joffrey's sword. It was a wedding gift from Jaime's father." Then she says, "Jon, that was made from father's sword, Ice." We notice that Brienne is afraid of what might happen next, so she steps in between them. Brienne says that Jaime's no longer the same man that he once was. He not only saved my life on multiple occasions, but he also helped me save yours. She says Jaime gave me the sword and the suit of armor to protect my own life and yours. You're right, Jaime does have half a Ned Stark's sword, but he also gave me the other half, and specifically said, take Ned Stark's sword to protect Ned Stark's daughters. Jaime then interrupts and says, I mean you no harm. I've only come here to help you fight the army of the dead. When that is done, I shall leave. Surprisingly, this silences everyone. But then Jaime pulls out his sword, and that is followed by 100 Northerners pulling out theirs. One of them shouts, Go ahead, Kingslayer. Give me a reason to cut you in half like your brother. I will kill you where you stand. Jaime says, I was only getting the sword out to give it back. He looks at Sansa and says, You can have your father's sword. Then he looks at Jon and says, But I was hoping I could use it to defend the realm. I know the Lannisters are no friends of the North. I know I have done many things, bad things, that I really wish I could take back, but I can't. All I can do now is be a man of my word, and I remember promising you that I would help you win this war. So, here I am, with 1,000 other soldiers to help you. My sister will not be sending any men, which is why I left and rallied up as many men as I could on my own. Euron Greyjoy lied as well. He's not on his way to the Iron Islands. He was actually heading to Essos to pick up 20,000 mercenaries to add to Cersei's army. She intends on fighting and defeating whoever survives the war in the north, which now includes me, I might add. When Daenerys hears Cersei lied, she gives Tyrion a venomous look. Varys puts his head down and walks away. Jon finally addresses Jaime. He says, You know I don't like you, sir. From the moment I met you, standing right where we are, I've not liked you since you disrespected me in my own home. He then motions to Jaime and Bronn and tells them to come inside, but the other 1,000 men are going to have to set up outside of the castle walls. None of them are allowed to enter until everything is sorted out inside. Everyone then gathers inside of Winterfell's main hall. As always, Lord Glover and Jon Royce are by far the loudest voices in the room. They give Jon a stern warning. If they allow this man to set up shop in the north, he will slit everyone's throat while they sleep. You cannot trust a Lannister. Lord Royce threatens to take the Knights of the Vale back to the Eyrie. He doesn't want to fight alongside the Kingslayer, or even the Targaryens for that matter. Unfortunately, this causes other lords to stand up and begin to say the same thing. They're all wanting to march their men home and wait out the coming storm. That's until Jon slams his fist into the table and yells, Enough. Jon says, I already made it known that I would not force anyone to stay here and fight, but I promise you, if you leave, you will die. We either fight together or die divided. This is the only way. Jon says, I have no love for the Lannisters. They're responsible for the death of my father, brother, and Lady Stark. I want them here no more than any of you, but we need men. I have stood face to face with the Night King. I know what he's capable of. None of you have seen the army of the dead, but you will, soon enough. When you do, you will be thankful for any and every man standing by your side. Trust me, we're all gonna need it. Finally, Jaime Lannister stands up to address the room. First, He apologizes to Jon for what has happened to him and his family. He swears he had nothing to do with Ned Stark's death or the Red Wedding. Jaime looks around the room for Varys because he knows Varys knows Joffrey had Ned Stark killed on his own. But to everyone's surprise, Varys is gone. No one has seen him since he walked away after finding out Cersei wasn't sending any additional support. Right as everyone's focus shifts from Jaime to Varys, in comes Bran Stark. Jaime gets very nervous. He knows everything's about to blow up in his face. We can see that Bran is being led into the hall by his sister, Arya Stark. Once she gets Bran sitting next to Jon and Sansa, she walks up to Jaime and says, "What's wrong? You look a little frightened." Arya says, "You might not remember me, Kingslayer, but I remember you." She looks over at Bronn and says, "I remember you too. The last time I saw the both of you, you were celebrating with Walder Frey. You were celebrating the fact that you had retaken my mother's childhood home, as well as killing our uncle, the Blackfish." She looks back at Jaime and says, "Do you remember? Here, let me help you." Arya then removes something from the bag that is slung over her shoulder. All of a sudden, Arya now appears to be the same serving girl that was flirting with Jaime at the Twins. Jaime and Bronn are both stunned. This even gets Jon's attention. He's wondering what the hell's happening. Arya then removes the dagger from her belt, as several men walk up behind Jaime and Bronn with their swords drawn. Arya says, "Is there anything else you would like to say to my family, Kingslayer?" Jaime's eyes are filling up with water. Jaime doesn't say a word, but he looks at Bran, and notices Bran is staring a hole right through him. For a few moments, Jaime's silent, struggling to find the right words to say. But then, right as the tension is reaching an all-time high, Bran finally says something. He says, "I know it was you." Lord Glover stands up and demands that Bran tell everyone what he knows about the Kingslayer. Bran's eyes never leave Jaime. After a few more moments, Sansa stands up and demands that Bran say something as well. Jaime, who's crying at this point, looks at Sansa and says, "No need, my lady. I will tell you everything." Jaime walks to the center of the room. He looks around at all the Stark children. He says, "I am truly sorry. I do not expect anyone to forgive me for what I'm about to say." Tyrion looks at Bran. He's certain he knows what's about to come next. Deep down, he's always knew. But now he realizes he might also die for the crimes of his family. Then, after a few more moments of silence, Jaime opens his mouth to confess, but they are suddenly interrupted by the sound of a horn coming from outside. The sound sent chills throughout the room. It is time. The dead have finally arrived. Winterfell's hall erupts into chaos. Jon immediately orders everyone outside, and those who cannot fight are to head for the crypts below to flee the north. They were ready for this. Jon had maps drawn up of the secret tunnel so everyone knew the escape route. As Jon gets outside, he signals for the trenches to be lit, which will enclose Winterfell in a ring of fire, preventing the dead from getting inside. Jon hands Widow's Wail back to Jaime, and he says, "If you have any shred of honor left, come prove it by fighting alongside me on the battlefield." Within seconds, they find themselves standing outside in a complete whiteout. They're only able to see within a few feet of their faces. Jon also wants Daenerys to go underground. Now that she's pregnant, he doesn't want to risk her getting injured. Daenerys refuses to sit out the fight. She says they're not going to survive without her and Drogon's help. Jon really has no option but to let her fight. He knows how effective Drogon is when Daenerys is on his back. This is when we will see Daenerys mount Drogon and take to the sky. However, we're not able to see much because of the whiteout. Jon then goes to the top of the wall in hopes of getting a glimpse of the army of the dead. For a few moments, he's not able to see any further than a few feet in front of him, but then he starts to see the faint glimmer of blue eyes in the distance. He's not able to see their bodies, but at this point, he can see there are thousands of blue eyes staring back at him, and they're not just in front of the castle. They have the entire castle surrounded by the dead. By now, the snow is getting so deep that the Dothraki are not able to ride their horses. Most of their forces are outside the walls. Jon hopes they're able to defend themselves in that storm. Bran Stark attempts to use the ravens so he can see where the Night King is at, but the birds are not taking flight in the storm. The Night King's storm essentially blocks Bran from taking control of any animals. All of a sudden, we begin to hear the screams of thousands of dead men as they get closer to the castle. The sound of them running almost sounds like a thunderstorm. The battle has officially begun. Jon Snow, Sandor Clegane, Brienne, Jaime Lannister, Grey Worm, Jorah Mormont, Tormund, Gendry, and Arya head out into the storm. All of the Valyrian steel weapons will now be on the battlefield. Once they get outside the main gate, the rest of the pitch is ignited, completing the ring of fire around the castle. Jon and the others are not going to be able to escape back to the castle if need be. Their destiny now lies ahead of them as they enter the battle. They are determined on stopping the Night King tonight. The faint glow of Drogon and Rhaegal's flames can be seen through the storm. We can only hope that Daenerys and her dragons are finding their targets. Just like in Season 8, the Night King has sent his army ahead of him so he can sit back and wait for the right time to strike. We are then shown a glimpse of dozens of White Walkers and giants walking onto the battlefield. This time, we are going to see all of the characters holding Valyrian steel weapons face off against White Walkers in some epic sword fights. However, at some point during the battle, Grey Worm will be slain by a White Walker. He was able to kill one of the White Walkers with his Dragonglass spear, but due to the limited visibility, he wasn't able to see the other one closing in on him. Daenerys is able to take out hundreds, if not thousands of Whites with each pass of her dragons, but the Unsullied, Dothraki, and even the Northerners are getting slaughtered in this massive storm. Brienne's leg will be severely wounded during the attack. Tormund and the Hound will try dragging her back to the castle wall, but they're also going to come under attack, which Tormund will be killed in the process. Jon and Jaime are both injured as well. Arya Stark's going to end up getting surrounded by several Whites. She's able to kill most of them, but if not for Jaime shielding her, she might have fallen as well. Daenerys will be able to burn thousands of Whites with Drogon and Rhaegal, but it's not enough to slow down the attack. It's nearly impossible to see all of them in the storm, not to mention they are surrounding the entire castle on all sides. After nearly every main character suffers a significant injury, they begin to fall back to the castle wall, although they are still trapped outside of the Ring of Fire. They are hoping Daenerys can hold them off while they try to get the injured to safety. Meanwhile, on the other side of the castle, one of the giants lays down on the fire to allow the rest of the army of the dead to reach the castle wall. Once that happens, they will be able to start climbing the walls or break down the gate. Now the Night King has entered the battle. Viserion's scream sounds so much louder than Drogon's or Rhaegal's. Daenerys is finally able to see Jon and the others near the castle. She wants to attempt to land her dragon so she can fly the injured somewhere much safer. They are completely exposed outside of the castle's defenses. When she lands Drogon, one of the White Walkers throws an ice spear, which cuts right through Rhaegal's wing. This causes Rhaegal to fly off erratically. As everyone starts to climb on Drogon, the sound of Viserion's scream seems to be getting closer, and his blue flame is getting brighter through the storm. Daenerys realizes she doesn't have much time to move, and there are too many people on Drogon's back for her to try to engage the Night King right now. Instead of dropping them off inside the courtyard, where she knows the Night King will surely find them, she decides to leave the castle instead. As they are flying away, Jon looks back at Winterfell, where we can now see there are thousands of Whites climbing over the castle walls. The Night King finally appears through the storm. The first thing he does is burn down the weirwood tree in the God's Wood. The heart tree that has been there for roughly 8,000 years is now up in flames. As they continue to fly away, Jon can only hope that the rest of his family were able to make it through the tunnels underground. This episode will end with the Night King landing his dragon right on top of Winterfell, as he claims the ancestral home of House Stark for himself. This episode will begin where we left off. We can see what used to be Winterfell. There is smoke rising from several different areas of the castle. The battlements are littered with thousands of dead bodies, most of which are burnt beyond recognition. The Night King's army is gathered inside of the castle walls. Now, although Daenerys was able to do some significant damage to the Night King's army, he still has a rather large force. The Night King and nearly a dozen White Walkers are seen walking through the God's Wood. The weirwood tree is now burnt. What was once white and red is now blackened with ash. The Night King and his White Walker stand to the side, as one of the giants knocks over the weirwood tree, crashing it to the ground. The Night King and the White Walkers then head through the courtyard as they make their way to the crypts of Winterfell. As the Night King is walking through the yard, he grabs one of the weapons that was laying on the ground. The Night King examines the Dragonglass almost as if he's inspecting what it's made of. He throws the weapon aside, but then he sets his hand over his chest. He remembers how the Children of the Forest created him. This may be something you want to remember for later. When the Night King does enter the crypts of Winterfell, he immediately heads for its lowest level, the level that has partially collapsed. It seems as if he has been here before. He knows exactly where to go. He looks down a tunnel that is still freshly lit by candlelight. He knows that members of House Stark were able to escape, and he already knows where they're heading next. In the following scene, we find out exactly who was able to escape through the secret tunnels. Sansa, Bran, Tyrion, Davos, Sam, Gilly, Baby Sam, Missandei, and several other known characters. This escape route led them right to the White Knife River. There are a few small boats stashed along the shore. They will make their way down the river until they reach White Harbor, which is where the rest of Dany's fleet is waiting. Davos was chosen to lead the group if they ever had to use this option. As we all know, Davos knows his way around the waters better than anyone. The map Jon had given them says to wait at White Harbor until they're able to regroup with everyone else. Davos, Tyrion, and Sam begin to help load everyone onto the small boats. As of right now, none of them know if Jon, Daenerys, or anyone else for that matter, were able to escape from Winterfell. All they know is to go to White Harbor and wait. When they finally go to load Bran onto the boat, they notice his eyes are rolled back in his head, and his hands are still gripping his chair. Davos looks somewhat nervous. Him and Sam have to actually unlock Bran's grip from the chair. You have to wonder what Bran is seeing at this time. In the next scene, Daenerys, Jon, Jaime, Beric, the Hound, Brienne, Arya, Gendry, and a few others land at White Harbor. They have been flying on Drogon non-stop ever since they left Winterfell. When they reach land, the first thing Jon says is, everyone else who escaped had a good head start on them, so they should be making their way down the river already. Jon wants to leave some of the injured here at White Harbor with Dany's fleet while they fly back up the river in hopes of locating Jon's family. Daenerys voices her concern for Rhaegal. He hasn't been seen since he was hit by one of the White Walker's ice spears. Now we all know Rhaegal obviously still had the ability to fly, but Dany is worried he may not find them. Jaime happens to be one of the first ones to volunteer to go with them. Although he did suffer some injuries when he saved Arya, he says he doesn't want to sit around while others head back out into dangerous territories. Jon Snow gives him a nod, and he thanks him for helping save Arya. Jon says, I need to get the rest of my family out of the north immediately. Winterfell is gone, along with most of our men. We will need more help if we're ever going to stop the Night King. We cannot allow the Night King to take King's Landing, even if it is Cersei Lannister sitting on the Iron Throne. Tyrion reminds them there are roughly 1 million people in King's Landing. If the Night King manages to add that many to his army, life as we know it will cease to exist. With a very concerned look on his face, Jon says, we need to talk to your sister again. She must understand. We will need the Golden Company to help us, and we may need protection behind those walls of the Red Keep. Finally, Jon looks at both Jaime and Tyrion Lannister and says, your sister is our only option. In the following scene, Theon Greyjoy and his small group of men prepare to head for the Blackwater Bay now that it's beginning to get dark outside. They have a good feeling the Iron Fleet will be there since it wasn't at the Iron Islands, nor did they come across it out at sea. All they need to do is slip in, grab Yara, then get the hell out of there before any of Euron's men are alerted. As Theon and his men walk across the beach of Dragonstone, they notice a shadowy figure sitting in one of their boats. Theon is shocked when he recognizes who it is. It's the Spider. Somehow Varys is there waiting for them. Theon is somewhat confused because he knows Varys should be in the north with Daenerys. They also take notice that there are no other boats in sight, and Varys appears to be completely dry. They have no idea how he has arrived on Dragonstone. When Theon says, what are you doing here? All Varys says is, I'm coming with you. Back in King's Landing, Qyburn meets with Cersei and Euron to tell them about some recent reports he's been receiving through his little birds. Qyburn tells them that Daenerys Targaryen's fleet is at White Harbor. She has abandoned Dragonstone while they fight in the north. Her fleet is her only means of transporting her large force quickly. They also remember that Jon said the army of the dead do not swim. Cersei doesn't want to allow Jon and Dany to have a way to flee to the sea. So, Cersei tells Euron to take some of the wildfire to White Harbor and burn Dany's entire fleet. Euron does agree to do this, but not until after he spends another night with the Queen in the Red Keep. Back in the north, we see several small boats heading down the White Knife River. We will focus on Bran, right as he opens his eyes after another series of visions. Sam is sitting right next to him. He is the first one to ask Bran, is everything okay? Bran had been out of it for quite some time, and his hands are starting to callous from the way he keeps gripping his chair. Bran says I'm fine, but he doesn't quite understand why he saw what he saw this time. Sam says, well, what did you see? Maybe I can help you. Was it the Night King? Is he getting close to us again? Bran says no, but then he looks at Gilly and he says, I saw your son. Everyone on the boat looks at little Sam. Then Bran says, "Your son was crying and he was surrounded by fire." Everyone on the boat is now concerned by the tone of Bran's voice. Gilly wraps her arms tightly around her son. Davos tells Gilly not to worry. They will be at White Harbor soon enough. Once they arrive, they will immediately load Gilly and the baby onto one of Dany's ships and get them out to sea. Bran then interrupts by whispering, "We won't be getting on any ships. Jon is on his way to get us now." Then he looks back at Gilly and says, "Does your son like dragons?" Gilly doesn't even want to look at Bran. He's starting to scare her, but before she can answer, a dragon appears through the clouds. We notice that it has a big hole in its right wing. Rhaegal seems to be following them down the river. Back at White Harbor, Daenerys, Jon, and Jaime get ready to leave at dawn so they can find the rest of the survivors. Jon tells Beric and the Hound to find some food to make sure everyone gets something to eat. They may not have many chances after they leave. Arya is seen helping Brienne clean out the injury on her leg, then get it wrapped up. One of the Whites had buried a sword deep into her thigh. As of right now, she can barely stand, let alone fight. The Hound notices Arya helping Brienne. He walks over to them and jokingly says, "I hope you're not asking her for mercy, because she won't give you any." Then he says, "Most men would die from an injury like that, but I'm sure you will have your sword up someone's arse in no time." By now, the sun is starting to rise. Jon, Dany, and Jaime walk over to climb on Drogon's back. Jon looks back at Arya and says, "If we're not back by sundown, you need to have everyone board a ship, then head to Dragonstone. The Night King will never be able to get his entire army to that island. It will be much safer there. We need to find Sansa, Bran, and the rest of the others as soon as possible. We cannot stay here for very long." Jon and Arya embrace each other one last time before he leaves. The scene will end as we see Drogon disappear into the clouds. In the following scene, Cersei and Euron are laying in bed together. Cersei is still asleep, but Euron is starting to wake up. He rolls over and looks at Cersei. He starts to run his finger across her lips. Then he moves his hand further and further down until it's under the blankets. Euron puts his hand between Cersei's thighs. He can feel a wetness on his fingertips. When he pulls his hand out from under the blanket, he can see that his fingers are covered in blood. He immediately rips the blankets off Cersei. He can now see that most of the bed is covered in blood as well. Cersei wakes up when she feels the cold air hit her naked body. She can see Euron standing over her with a strange look on his face. Cersei then sits up and is suddenly horrified by what she sees. This is when she will begin to scream and cry. The Mountain runs into the room with his sword drawn, expecting to see Cersei in a struggle. Euron immediately raises his hand, but the Mountain walks right past him. He grabs one of the sheets, covers it over Cersei, then carries her out of the room. Euron then gets dressed, leaving the room with a wicked smile on his face. As he's walking across the throne room, one of the Lannister guards walks up to him and tells him there is something that he needs to see. We follow them outside, and the guard begins to lead him to the water. When Euron gets close enough to the bay, he stops in his tracks. He appears to be shocked by what he sees. Almost all of his Iron Fleet are gone. The Silence is still there, but that's about it. Euron quickly boards the Silence. There are several men laying on the deck with their throats slit. When Euron enters the main cabin, he notices Yara's gone. There is a dagger sticking into the wall, with a note left under it. Written in blood, all the note says is, "What is dead may never die." Signed, Yara Greyjoy. Euron removes the dagger and the note from the wall. He turns around and calmly says to the Lannister guard, "How does someone sneak into the Blackwater Bay and make off with an entire fleet without someone noticing?" Before the Lannister guard can even mutter a single word, Euron jams the dagger into the man's neck. Euron leaves the Silence, heading back into the city. Then we will see Euron meet with a few men from the City Watch. They head to the chambers of the commander of the Golden Company. When they enter the room, though, they notice it's empty as well. He tells the captain of the City Watch to gather up all of his men. They need to find Harry Strickland immediately. They should check every brothel, every inn, or anywhere they think they might be. We will then begin to see some quick scenes of the City Watch entering every home and establishment within the city. Not only is Harry Strickland gone, but it appears as if the Golden Company has also left. Euron Greyjoy is furious. He orders the captain to bring him every single man that was on watch last night. Either these men are extremely incompetent, or they were paid off. Now it doesn't matter what happened, they will all have to die for this. Back on Dragonstone, Theon has nearly 100 men gathering up as much dragonglass as they can find that is still left over in the caves. They will be leaving very shortly to head north. Theon now has an entire fleet, with over 20,000 men from the Golden Company. Varys is seen with a smile on his face. It's obvious he has been up to something, but we don't know what just yet. When Theon exits the cave, he will walk over to his sister Yara. After looking at her for several moments, his eyes begin to fill up with water. He can see Yara's covered in blood, with bruises all over her body. Theon also knows that Euron had her tongue removed. Finally, Theon says, "Yara, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I left you. I'm sorry for what he has done to you, but I promise you this, we will get our vengeance." Yara steps in closer and wraps her arms around her brother. She's upset, but ultimately thankful to still be alive. Varys and the commander of the Golden Company are now standing side by side. Harry Strickland will reach out to shake Varys' hand. He says, "It's good to see you again, my old friend. Illyrio told me you would eventually come for us one day, but I wasn't entirely sure if you were still alive." Before they can finish their conversation, they both notice several ships approaching the beach. All of the men on the beach begin to scramble for their weapons. They have been expecting retaliation from Euron Greyjoy, but they did not think it would happen this soon. It takes Varys a few moments to recognize the banners waving on the ships. When they finally stop flapping in the wind, Varys has a fearful look on his face. The banner is displaying the flaming heart. For Varys, this sight is even worse than Euron Greyjoy looking for revenge. He now knows Melisandre and Kinvara have arrived. He remembers what Melisandre said to him right before she left. As we see Melisandre and Kinvara land on the beach, they begin to walk over to Varys. The red rubies they are both wearing on their throats are glowing brighter than ever. Varys can hardly look directly into them without getting blinded. Melisandre greets him first by saying, "Hello, dear spider." Kinvara places a hand on Varys, and she says, "Do we still serve the same queen?" Varys nods his head. Kinvara says, "Good. You're coming with us then. All of you must come with us. Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen are no longer in the far north. Winterfell is gone. They will be back at White Harbor soon, but that's not where we're heading. Varys, tell the others it's time to leave." Varys is visibly shaken up by all of this. He doesn't know what to think, but he does feel the urge to do as they say. In the very next scene, Daenerys, Jon, and Jaime spot Rhaegal in the sky above the White Knife River. They also notice there are a few small boats directly below him. They've found Sansa, Bran, and the rest of the survivors. Both of the dragons begin to cry out to each other. Davos will be seen giving a signal to the other boats. They are to head to the shore to meet with Jon and Dany right away. After Drogon lands, Jon will embrace his family when they exit the boats. Everyone else begins to climb on the back of the dragons. They will now head back to White Harbor to regroup with everyone else. However, before they leave, Bran tells Jon they need to speak as soon as they get back. There isn't much time left. We will see the Night King again, tonight. This scene will end when the dragons take to the sky. Back at White Harbor, Arya and Gendry begin telling everyone to prepare to leave. By now it's starting to get dark, and Jon said if they weren't back by sundown, they were to board a ship and go to Dragonstone. The Night King might be heading this way as we speak. We cannot stay here for very long. Beric Dondarrion stands up and says, "They're here." Both dragons come up from behind them and land. Arya rushes over to see who made it out of Winterfell alive. She is relieved when she sees her brother and sister. They all begin helping everyone off the dragons. When Arya sees Jaime, she says, "Thank you for helping my family." Then she reaches out to shake his hand. We will see Jon help Bran down from Drogon. Then Jon says, "Okay, let's talk." Bran says, "Are you sure you don't want to speak privately?" Jon says no. "If there is something that I must know, just go ahead and say it now." Everyone starts to look at Jon and Bran. Sam already knows what's coming next. Finally, Bran says, "Jon, you aren't exactly who you think you are. There is great power in you that you never knew existed, but I'm sure you've always felt it." Jon looks somewhat confused. Then Bran says, "Why do you think you found Ghost? Why do you think Father never told you who your mother was? Why do you think you were brought back from the dead? You have the blood of the dragon. You have the blood of ice and fire. You are the Song of Ice and Fire, Jon. That's why you were chosen. None of this is a coincidence. Things were set in motion long before either you or I were here. All of it was leading to what will happen by the end of tonight. The Three-Eyed Raven showed me your birth for a reason. It wasn't to only show me who your parents were. It's because you are the one who will have to bring the dawn. Every time I try to look for answers about how to defeat the Night King, all I see are images that point directly at you. Ned Stark was not your father. You are the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. You are the one who is destined to defeat the Night King. Everyone now has their eyes set on Jon. Everyone is silent, almost as if they're waiting for something to happen. Jon seems to be struggling with trying to process everything Bran just told him. Finally, after a few moments, Sam walks closer to Jon. He says it's true. He removes a rolled up parchment from his sleeve. He hands it to Jon, and he says, it's a record of Rhaegar's annulment with Elia Martell. Afterwards, there was a secret marriage in Dorne. Bran has seen it for himself. Bran says, Jon, you've never been a bastard. You are the legitimate heir to the Iron Throne. Your real name is Aegon Targaryen. This new revelation stuns Daenerys Targaryen. Her eyes are now filling up with water. She places her hand over her stomach. Sansa and Arya are now both at a loss for words. Bran says, I know all of this might be hard to grasp right now, but we have to leave very soon. When all of this is over, you will know that it's the truth. Finally, Jon begins to speak. As he shakes his head, he says, none of this makes any sense. Why didn't father say something? Bran says, your mother made him promise. He could not allow Robert to find out who your real father was. He would have murdered you. Rhaegar never kidnapped Lyanna. She loved him, and together, they had you. Rhaegar said you would be the Song of Ice and Fire, and he was right. That day has finally come. There is only one more thing you must do in order to defeat the Night King. You will kill him, but it won't be here. It's time to go. The Night King has already left Winterfell, and he's coming for all of us. Everyone still seems to be shocked by the news, but they take Bran's advice by immediately preparing to leave. Most of them head for Dany's ships, but Bran tells them to stop. He says, we cannot get there by sea. We need to fly there now. The Night King is on his way to the Trident. We must meet him there. I have already seen the battlefield in my visions. The Lady in Red is on her way there as well. Daenerys says, Melisandre? Sounding somewhat surprised. She then says, I'm not going to be able to fly everyone there with Drogon alone. Half of you will need to get on Rhaegal, but I'm not sure how he's going to react without having a rider. Daenerys and Bran both look at Jon. Jon shakes his head no. He's never attempted anything like that before. Bran reminds him, you have the blood of the dragon, Jon. You're the only other person here that can do this. You have to believe. As I said before, there is power in you, and you need to embrace it. Daenerys says, Bran is right, Jon. I should have known when you and Drogon immediately bonded on Dragonstone. Viserion died trying to save you. I named Rhaegal after my brother, your father. It has to be you who mounts him. This is when Jon realizes he has no other choice. He walks over to Rhaegal, right up to his face. At first, he begins to pet him for a few moments, staring into his eyes, hoping to create a bond. Jon then whispers something to the dragon. Then he slowly walks around him and climbs on top. When Jon sits down, Rhaegal lets out a scream so loud it causes little Sam to cry. Rhaegal then stretches out his wings and begins to flap them. Sansa and Arya cannot believe what they're seeing. After a few more moments, Jon yells, let's go. Half of them climb on Drogon with Daenerys, and the other half climb on Rhaegal with Jon. They both take flight, heading straight for the Trident. In the next scene, Euron enters Qyburn's lab room. He had been examining Cersei after her miscarriage. Cersei has lost a significant amount of blood. Qyburn was keeping her sedated with milk of the poppy. Euron informed Cersei of what happened. Most of the Iron Fleet is gone, as well as all of the Golden Company. Euron says, I now have no reason to stay in the city. He knows Cersei doesn't have nearly enough Lannister men or City Watch to hold the city for much longer. He says he's taken the silence and leaving. Cersei says, wait. She sits up and says, I thought you said you were a king. You promised that you would never abandon me, but now you want to leave because we lost a few boats and some men? We haven't lost the war just yet. I still have one thing they don't. Daenerys said the army of the dead are 100,000 strong. Have patience, my king. The dead will crush our enemies for us. Daenerys already lost one dragon. She will lose the rest. King's Landing is well protected. No one will ever enter through those city gates. Even if they did somehow manage to breach them, I will make sure there won't be a city left. My plans were already set in motion long before you ever arrived in King's Landing. You said you wanted to rule Westeros together. You said you wanted to crush our enemies together. You said you needed a queen at your side. But you're only a king of the Iron Islands. How about I make you a true king, and together we can watch all of our enemies burn? The final scene of the episode will end as we see an evil smile come across Euron Greyjoy's face. This episode begins as we see Melisandre, Kinvara, and Varys traveling by land. They are leading an enormous party of over 25,000 soldiers. Melisandre and Kinvara were able to bring 1,000 soldiers of their own, along with several thousand followers of R'hllor. Following closely behind are Theon, Yara, and the commander of the Golden Company. Thanks to Varys and Theon, they have the 20,000 men from the Golden Company and some of the Ironborn men. Before they left Dragonstone, they were able to get enough dragonglass to fill a very large wagon, but not nearly enough to arm all of the 25,000 men. After watching them travel for a few moments, Melisandre and Kinvara will finally find the location they have been seeing in the flames. We are now at the Trident, the same location Robert Baratheon defeated Rhaegar Targaryen. This is where they will set up camp as they wait for Jon, Daenerys, and the others to arrive. Some of the followers of R'hllor will begin to make several massive bonfires alongside the river. Everyone watches as Melisandre and Kinvara begin speaking in a foreign tongue as they look into the fire. Varys is visibly shaken. He is reminded of what the sorcerer said as he threw his parts into the flames. He's starting to think maybe Melisandre is right. Maybe he will die in Westeros after all. After a few more moments, Melisandre begins speaking in the common tongue. She talks of the long night and the one who will bring the dawn. Melisandre and Kinvara both begin chanting again, referring to the Great Other and the Lord of Light. They finish up by saying, "The night is dark and full of terrors, but tonight those terrors will be extinguished forever." Varys is unsettled by all of this. As the day grows darker, the rubies on their throats continue to glow brighter. Even Melisandre's eyes are beginning to turn red. Kinvara notices the look on Varys' face. She walks over to speak with him. She wants to know, was he looking into the flames as they were chanting? She also says to Varys, "Would you like me to show you the answers the Lord of Light has given us?" Varys doesn't make eye contact with Kinvara. He doesn't want to know, but she leans in closer to Varys anyway and begins to whisper. She says, "There will be a great battle here tonight. Almost every single person you see here will die before the morning sunrise. We all must make our sacrifices. I will die tonight. Melisandre will die tonight, and you, Lord Varys, will die tonight. The Lord of Light has given us protection until now, but now we must protect him." In the next scene, we go down to King's Landing. There are over a dozen lords and ladies gathered inside the Great Hall of the Red Keep. Qyburn and Euron are standing at the top of the steps right next to the Iron Throne. As always, Euron is dressed in all black, only this time, he has a massive golden kraken stitched on the back of his long leather coat. After a few moments of silence, Cersei walks in with her escort, Gregor Clegane. Cersei is wearing a black gown with golden trim. On the back of her gown, there is a massive golden lion and kraken stitched on the back. Qyburn is shown holding two brand new crowns that also appear to be displaying the lion and the kraken. Both of the crowns are made of solid gold. Now that Cersei has lost just about everything, she cannot afford to lose Euron Greyjoy now, as sad as that may sound. Jaime Lannister, who was once her brother, lover, and commander of her armies, is now gone to the other side. The Golden Company are nowhere to be found, and the rest of her alliances are either dead or too small to make any significant impact. All she has now is Euron, Qyburn, the Mountain, and a few thousand Lannister soldiers and men of the City Watch. Not to mention, she did just lose another baby, so it's safe to say she is desperate at this point, although she does somehow remain confident, because according to her, she still has one thing Daenerys Targaryen does not. So, as promised in the last episode, Cersei marries Euron Greyjoy. After Qyburn makes it official, we will see Euron place the new crown on Cersei's head. Then Cersei will place a new crown on Euron's head, making him her king. They don't bother having a feast to celebrate the occasion. They don't even have a bedding ceremony since Cersei is still recovering from the miscarriage. Instead, they go outside to check up on all of King's Landing's defenses. All of the Lannister soldiers are now staying inside the walls of the Red Keep. The City Watch are shown bringing up more wildfire to place near each gate that enters the city. There are now roughly 100 ballistas strategically placed around the city of King's Landing. We will see one of Qyburn's little birds run over and hand him a note. After reading it, Qyburn announces to Cersei and Euron the final phase is complete. In the following scene, Jon, Daenerys, and the others are flying further south on Drogon and Rhaegal. Right before they left White Harbor, Bran said they must go to the Trident, but he hasn't said exactly where they should land. That's until they spot a massive force making camp next to the river. They can also see several large fires burning into the evening sky. As they drop down out of the clouds, Bran signals to Jon that this is the right location. This is where he saw the Night King and the shadowy figure standing face to face on the battlefield. As soon as they land the dragons, Daenerys is immediately greeted by Varys, who is accompanied by the commander of the Golden Company. Varys apologizes for leaving the North without notice. He explains how it was necessary so that his alliance with the Golden Company was not revealed. Otherwise, that information may have made it back to King's Landing before Varys was able to make it there himself. Daenerys understands, and she even seems grateful. Jon seems very surprised that Varys was able to pull this off. They believe that Varys fled so he could save his own ass. This could not have came at a better time because as far as they know, the only ones to survive the Winterfell attack are the ones who just landed on the dragons. Without Varys getting the Golden Company, or Melisandre and Theon bringing more men, they would have had no chance but to ask Cersei for protection, which we all know she would never agree to. Theon informs Jon and Daenerys that he has most of Euron's fleet, along with several thousand men of the Ironborn, who are now ready to swear fealty to Jon and Dany. When Daenerys sees Yara, she gives her a big hug, and tells her that she's sorry for what has happened. Daenerys swears that once they finish the Night King, they will kill Cersei Lannister and Euron Greyjoy next. Varys then begins to tell Jon and Daenerys how he came in contact with Kinvara and Melisandre. Varys says, Melisandre brought 1,000 soldiers of the Fiery Hand, as well as several thousand followers of R'hllor. He also tells Jon and Dany what Kinvara said, about how almost everyone will die here tonight. Jon doesn't like the sound of that, especially since there are so many massive bonfires around the camp. He's afraid that Kinvara may be referring to sacrifices being made in the name of the Lord of Light. He reminds them that the whole reason Melisandre is no longer in his service is because she burned Princess Shireen alive. Jon tells Dany that he needs to go find Melisandre right away. He needs to keep her and Davos away from each other until he can figure everything out. He doesn't want a battle to break out before the Night King even arrives. We follow Jon over to the large fire. Melisandre and Kinvara are surrounded by several soldiers who are dressed in red from head to toe. Jon notices the ruby in Melisandre's necklace is glowing brighter than he's ever seen it before. When Melisandre notices Jon walking over, she decides to approach him before he can say anything in front of everyone else. Jon stops in his tracks when they make eye contact. For the first time, Jon actually looks afraid when he notices Melisandre's eyes are now the color of blood. Melisandre breaks eye contact to look down at Jon's sword. This causes her eyes to glow brighter, but Jon finally says, "Why are you here?" Melisandre says, "I told you, Jon Snow. I can help you defeat the Night King. You need me now more than ever. Darkness will soon be upon us, and we can no longer run or hide. I have seen it in the flames, and your brother has even seen it in his visions. That's why you're here. All of us will dance in front of the fires tonight, Jon Snow, and you, most of all, will be victorious. There has to be one last great sacrifice. That, too, I have seen in the flames." Jon cuts her off. He says, "There will be no more sacrifices." Melisandre's eyes begin to glow again, causing Jon to look away. Melisandre says, "Do you know what the Night King wants, Jon Snow? Do you know why he has finally come south?" The fires behind Melisandre begin to burn hotter and higher than before. The red ruby on her neck also begins to shine brighter as well. Finally, Melisandre says, "The Night King is coming for his replacement. The one he has chosen is among us now, and he will not stop until he gets what he has came for." Melisandre raises her voice as she says, "We must give his replacement to the fire, Jon Snow. The Great Other will not stop, but we must put an end to all the terrors in the night." Melisandre's voice was so loud it has attracted the attention of almost everyone in the camp. They begin to gather around Jon and Melisandre. Once again, Melisandre says, "We have to give him to the fire, Jon Snow. That is our only way. We have to make this great sacrifice if we're going to stop the Night King." Everyone from Jon's party is now watching. Arya and Davos walk up the stand directly behind Jon. The tension is beginning to rise throughout the camp. Melisandre and Kinvara's rubies continue to get so bright that most of the crowd gathered around have to shield their eyes. Davos tells Jon that Melisandre should not be here. All of a sudden, the chanting stops. The 25,000 soldiers gathered in attendance near the fires are completely silent. Melisandre has noticed something, or someone standing out in the crowd, but no one is quite sure who she is looking at. That's until Melisandre sticks out her hand and points directly at Gilly and her baby. Jon was afraid this might happen. When Davos realizes what Melisandre is insinuating, he grabs Arya's dagger off her hip, then lunges for Melisandre's neck. A few members of the Fiery Hand are able to quickly apprehend him, but Davos begins to scream. He shouts, Melisandre has already burned one child. He will not stand by and watch as she burns another. Arya is now holding Needle. She has always known Melisandre was evil ever since she took Gendry away. She would take pleasure in crossing off another name that was once on her list. Melisandre says, I am sorry, but this is the only way. You have to bring me that child. The Lord of Light has shown me a great sacrifice in the flames, and I am his instrument. Gendry now has his Dragonglass Warhammer in his hands. They are not about to allow Melisandre to get her hands on Gilly's son. Jon is starting to get very nervous. He was afraid a battle might break out before the Night King showed up. The tension across the camp is now at an all-time high. But then we see Bran Stark begin to move himself closer to the fire. Everyone begins to settle as they watch Bran stop himself right next to Melisandre. A few moments go by as everyone wonders what will happen next. Finally, Bran begins to speak. He says, Melisandre is right. There will be a great sacrifice here tonight. I have seen it in my visions. I did see Gilly's son surrounded by the fires. Bran then looks to Gilly and says, your son was meant as an offering to the Night King. He was not meant to leave the North with you and Samwell. Your son was going to be the final sacrifice to the Great Other, but here we are. Bran moves closer to Gilly. He tells her he has seen all of this in his visions. He says, your son is more special than you know. All of Craster's sons were offerings to the Night King. Each of them became one of the Night King's personal guards, but your son was meant to be more than that. He would have been the 100th offering, which had him in line to becoming the next Night King. The Night King needs newborn babies as his instruments, and they all need to come from a special bloodline. Your son comes from that bloodline. You see, Craster's father wasn't just an ordinary man of the Night's Watch. He comes from a bloodline that stretches back for thousands of years. Bran then turns to Melisandre and Jon. He says, Melisandre said there would be a great sacrifice here tonight. She is right. Like I said, I did see that in my vision, Jon, but it won't be Gilly's son who gets sacrificed. Bran then looks at Melisandre and says, that great sacrifice will be you. You are the lady in red that I have seen on the battlefield. As Bran is telling her this, we begin to see the clouds start to move in above them. We will also notice the fires are starting to die down. It's getting colder, which can only mean one thing. Jon is noticing all of this, which causes him to alert everyone gathered around. Jon says the Night King has brought the storm. He then yells for everyone to grab their weapons. Bran grabs Jon by the arm and says, I told you there is great power in you. You have to embrace it. I need you to trust me. This is our last chance. You must kill Melisandre if you want to stop the Night King. You have to bring the dawn, or we will all die. The fires begin to get brighter again. Melisandre's ruby is getting so hot that smoke is beginning to rise as it touches her skin. Davos yells, she murdered Princess Shireen, and she wanted to murder Gilly's son. Gendry steps in and says she wanted to kill me too. Jon looks over at Daenerys, wondering what he should do. The storm above them is growing larger, and snow is starting to fall into the fires. Kinvara is heard chanting to the Lord of Light. She promises they will make the great sacrifice that he needs. Bran, Davos, Gendry, and now Arya are all telling Jon to kill Melisandre. As Jon reaches for his sword, Melisandre drops to her knees. At that same exact moment, Viserion's scream echoes across the battlefield. The Night King and his dragon are here. Thousands of blue eyes can now be seen in the distance. Samwell Tarly runs over to Jon while holding his family's ancestral Valyrian steel sword. Sam says, Melisandre wanted to murder my son. If I can't kill her myself, I want you to use my family's sword. It's called Heartsbane. Without hesitation, Jon grabs the sword and he plunges it deep into Melisandre's chest. Black smoke immediately begins to roll out of Melisandre's nose and mouth. The red ruby on her neck glows so bright that it actually bursts into a red liquid that begins to run down her chest onto the sword. As Jon pulls the sword out of her chest, the liquid from the red ruby continues to cover the blade, until the sword itself begins to glow, turning it into the red sword of heroes. Melisandre's lifeless body collapses to the ground. We can see the reflection of the sword burning in Jon Snow's eyes. Everyone begins to run into position as the thousands of blue eyes continue to get closer. Daenerys is shown mounting Drogon. Jon Snow takes out Longclaw, then he tosses it to Ser Jorah Mormont without saying a word. Jorah, Jaime, Bronn, the Hound, Arya, Gendry, Beric, Brienne, and all of the others have their weapons drawn. We can hear several wolves howl in the distance. This gets Arya's attention. She turns her head to see where the noise was coming from. Jon Snow runs over to Mount Rhaegal with the burning red sword still in hand. This is when the Night King will break through the clouds, flying faster than anyone has ever seen a dragon fly before. Viserion swoops over the Golden Company and torches hundreds of men in a single strike. Jon and Daenerys immediately take to the sky. Jon signals for Daenerys to take out his army, while Jon heads after the Night King. The night sky begins to light up with bright colors of blue, orange, and red. The battlefield is on fire. Hundreds, and maybe even thousands are dying with each pass of the dragons. There are nearly 24 White Walkers leading the army of the dead. Half of them are armed with ice spears, as are 2 of the giants. Jorah, Jaime, Beric, the Hound, Arya, Gendry, and Brienne all head for the White Walkers. There will be an epic battle where 7 main characters fight roughly 12 White Walkers at the same time. Gendry delivers the first devastating blow as he smashes one of the White Walkers right in the face with his Dragonglass Warhammer. Arya Stark jams her dagger into the side of the neck of another White Walker. Jorah Mormont kills one of the White Walkers as he rescues Brienne, who is still recovering from a leg injury she suffered in the first attack. Jaime Lannister is disarmed by one of the White Walkers. His sword falls to the ground, but Sir Bronn of the Blackwater is there to pick it up and finish off the White Walker for Jaime. Bronn smiles, then he tosses the sword back. He says, "If you drop the bloody thing again, I'm keeping it." Every time we see a White Walker die, thousands of Whites die with it. The commander of the Golden Company is seen trying to load up one of the ballistas he brought with him from King's Landing. He grabs a long shard of dragonglass and fires it at one of the giants in the army of the dead. It hits the giant right in the chest, killing it immediately. He loads up another shot, then takes aim at Viserion, but the dragon is moving too fast to get a clear shot. Another one of the White Walkers is preparing to throw his ice spear at Daenerys and Drogon, but Jorah Mormont charges at him, causing the ice spear to fall to the ground. Unfortunately, the White Walker is able to overpower Jorah Mormont. The White Walker rips Longclaw from his hands, then turns the sword on Jorah, shoving it deep into his chest. Jaime Lannister runs up from behind and sticks Widow's Wail into the White Walker's back, killing him instantly, but it's too late. Jorah Mormont is dead. Beric Dondarrion sacrifices himself to save the Hound from getting killed by another one of the White Walkers. Almost half of the army of the dead is gone now that most of the White Walkers have been defeated, but the Night King is still winning the battle. The whole encampment is now getting swarmed by the Whites. Daenerys kills the last remaining giant, as well as hundreds of more Whites as she attempts to push them back. Everyone begins to fall back to the river. Jon finally catches up to the Night King. Rhaegal shoots his flame at Viserion, but it doesn't seem to have any effect on the undead dragon. With all the chaos happening around them, no one notices another White Walker getting ready to throw his ice spear. This time, he goes for Jon Snow and Rhaegal. The ice spear cuts right through Rhaegal's wing, causing the dragon to spiral out of control. The injury forces Rhaegal to the ground. Jon Snow will now have to continue his fight on foot, with the glowing red sword still in his hand. This is when everyone realizes they have to kill Viserion, otherwise they don't stand a chance. Daenerys is not going to be able to kill all the Whites and fight off the Night King at the same time. Everyone begins to fall back even further, to where the ballista is located. Now several different characters are taking turns trying to take Viserion out of the sky. Bronn is able to land a shot on Viserion, but the dragonglass actually bounces off the dragon. He fires again and again and again, but the dragonglass either bounces off the dragon or explodes on impact. Finally, Kinvara whispers something to Bran. We will then begin to see several soldiers from the Fiery Hand form a circle around Bran. They will guard him as he tries something that has never been done before. Bran's eyes roll back in his head, and when this happens, Viserion almost immediately lets out a thunderous scream as Bran enters his mind. Bran has now taken control of Viserion, but we will see blood start to run from Bran's nose as the Night King tries to force Bran out of the dragon. Bran will begin to go into a seizure very similar to the ones we saw Jojen have many seasons ago. After several tense moments, Viserion will begin to fall from the sky. The dragon will slam into the ground, throwing the Night King off his back. When the few remaining White Walkers see this, they will set their sights for Bran. Once again, our heroes will get into another epic battle with the White Walkers. Unfortunately, there aren't very many men left to hold them off, but now that Viserion is out of the sky, Daenerys is able to roast the few thousand whites that are left. Although very injured, Brienne Tarth is able to kill one of the White Walkers with Oathkeeper. However, another one of the White Walkers decapitates Lord Varys with a blow so devastating it sends his head flying nearly 100 feet across the battlefield. Then, all of a sudden, the White Walkers stop in their tracks. Everyone's focus shifts to the Night King as he is seen pulling a curved ice sword off his back. The Night King takes one last look at Viserion as the dragon closes his eyes for good. Jon notices Daenerys coming back around on Drogon. He waves his red sword in the air, signaling for Daenerys to land behind him. Jon sees this as his opportunity to finally challenge the Night King to 1 versus 1 combat. Everyone on the battlefield is now in a standstill, with their eyes set on Jon Snow and the Night King. They never take their eyes off each other as they walk to the middle of the battlefield. Jon and the Night King continue walking until they are about 10 feet from one another. The Night King is holding his ice sword, and Jon is holding his burning red sword of heroes. They stand here, staring at each other silently for what seems like several minutes. This is the exact imagery Bran Stark saw over and over again in his visions. Jon Snow is the black silhouette, standing face to face with the Night King with the burning red sword in his hand. Finally, Jon Snow and the Night King begin to move. It's very slow at first, as they move in circles, sizing each other up. Neither one of them are ready to commit to any particular move that could possibly leave them exposed. After a few more moments of this, Jon finally takes a swing at the Night King's head, but he misses by a mile. It's obvious the Night King is so much faster than the White Walkers. Then the Night King takes a swing at Jon, causing Jon to lose his footing, but he quickly recovers. When Jon looks down, he notices the ice sword cut right through his fur and leather. It was much closer than he thought. The Night King swings again, but Jon is not fast enough to get out of the way this time. The ice sword cuts and burns into Jon's arm, causing him to hold the sword with his other hand. Jon grips the handle as hard as he can, then swings the sword as fast as the snap of a whip. The Night King raises his ice sword to block the shot, but the burning sword cuts right through, shattering the ice sword into 1,000 pieces. Jon has confidence now, but the Night King takes several steps back as one of the White Walkers simultaneously throws him another weapon. The Night King snaps the ice spear over his knee, now creating a weapon for each hand. The look on Jon's face lets us know his confidence is already slipping away. But he takes a deep breath anyway and rushes forward. The fighting that ensues over the next few minutes will be very reminiscent of when Ned Stark fought Sir Arthur Dayne at the Tower of Joy. Every time Jon rushes in, the Night King will force him back. Every time the Night King rushes in, Jon somehow holds him off. Although some of the strikes were not very clean, the Night King has made contact many times. When he sees that Jon is struggling to stand and catch his breath, the Night King moves in for the kill. The Night King rushes in one last time, bringing both ends of the ice spear high above his head. But as he brings them down, Jon lunges forward with his burning sword, jamming it right through the Night King's armor, deep into his chest. The Night King explodes into 1,000 pieces of ice. Just like we saw in Season 8, the rest of his army falls with him. We can see steam rising off Jon's sword, and water dripping from it onto the ground. Everyone watching was holding their breath during those last few moments, but they all finally let out a sigh of relief. The clouds in the sky begin to open up. The snow suddenly stops falling. The red glow on Jon's sword begins to dim. Daenerys moves her hand over her stomach, as she feels the baby begin to kick. Jon sees this and he walks over to Daenerys. He embraces her in front of everyone. Then, he embraces his family. As daylight begins to appear through the clouds, everyone starts to walk across the battlefield. It's nothing but death and destruction all around them. Sansa and Arya walk over to speak with Jon. They both ask him what they're going to do next. Jon looks completely exhausted at this point. But before he can answer, Daenerys says, there is only one thing left to do. The episode ends as Daenerys says, we're gonna kill Cersei Lannister and take back the Iron Throne. The final episode begins with us getting a good look at just how devastating that battle was. There are thousands upon thousands of dead bodies scattered across the battlefield. The exact location where Rhaegar Targaryen's lifeless body once fell has now turned into a river of blood. Daenerys Targaryen once had one of the greatest forces Westeros has ever seen, but after the battle against the Night King, she now has less than 1,000 men in her army. The men that survive do not appear as if they can even march on the King's Landing, let alone fight in another battle. Before they make any decisions, they will hold a ceremony for all of their fallen friends, very similar to the one we saw during Season 8. During a very somber scene, they will burn the bodies of Jorah Mormont, Beric Dondarrion, Varys, Melisandre, Kinvara, and many others. Afterwards, Jon and Daenerys will go speak to the commander of the Golden Company since he currently has the most amount of able-bodied soldiers left. They begin to devise a strategy about how they're going to attack King's Landing. He tells Jon and Daenerys about all the recent additions to the city's defenses. Daenerys is worried about attacking the city with her dragons now that she knows there are dozens of ballistas set up around the city gates, aiming directly at the sky. They also know they no longer have the numbers to hit the capital head-on. This is when the Lannister brothers become very useful. They tell Jon and Daenerys if they can get them close enough to the Red Keep without getting spotted, they can get them inside the castle. They are very familiar with all the city's secret tunnels. This gets Arya Stark's attention. She too knows about a secret way to get in and out of the Red Keep. She tells them about the time that she was chasing a cat through the dungeons of the Red Keep, and how that secret passageway led out to a storm drain that emptied right into the Blackwater Bay. Before they leave, they gather up some of their best fighters to take with them on the back of the dragons. They want to enter the city right away, although the remaining soldiers will have to march there by foot. This scene will end as we see a few dozen characters take to the sky on the back of Drogon and Rhaegal. As Jon is flying Rhaegal, he looks back at the trident one last time. We get our final glimpse of the battlefield and the massive fires that are burning all of the fallen men and women who helped save the realm from what would have likely been the extinction of human existence. In the following scene, Cersei, Euron, the Mountain, and Qyburn are discussing their own plans, in case they come under attack anytime soon. Cersei tells Qyburn, if it looks like this city is about to fall, make sure all the candles and torches are lit near the wildfire. Cersei has no intentions of surrendering or fleeing King's Landing. Cersei's made one thing very clear. If the walls are breached, she will blow up the entire city or die trying. The Mad King already had wildfire stashed all over the city, but Cersei made sure Qyburn placed the majority of it right under the Red Keep. There are hundreds of pots directly underneath the Great Hall where the Iron Throne is located. After they discuss their strategy, Cersei has Qyburn leave the room. She wants to have a word with Euron alone. Cersei closes the door behind her, cutting us off from hearing what she had to say to Euron. We then follow Qyburn back outside. We can see that the capital is very alive this evening. There are Lannister soldiers and men of the City Watch walking along the top of the castle walls. There are several men guarding each gate, as well as several men standing next to the ballistas. King's Landing is ready for battle. The scene ends as Qyburn receives a note from one of his little birds. His eyes go very wide as he reads the contents of the letter. He immediately heads back for Cersei's chambers. We go back to Jon and Daenerys flying on the dragons. We're able to see the glow at King's Landing far off into the distance. Jon signals for them to land the dragons near the water. They're still several miles outside of the city, but they don't want to take the dragons too close just yet. The sun is almost all the way down by the time they get everyone off the dragons. They have decided to send in Arya and Jaime first, but they want to wait until they can hide under the cover of darkness. Although they still do not completely trust Jaime Lannister, they know he is very familiar with the inner workings of the Red Keep, and if he did somehow get spotted by the guards, he might be able to convince them that he's returning to fight for Cersei. Arya was chosen not only because she knows her way around the castle, but also because of her Faceless Men training. All of that training makes her a perfect candidate for a mission like this one. They've decided to enter through the storm drain Arya found when she was chasing the cat through the dungeons. Since the drain emptied into the Blackwater Bay, they will be able to get there via boat, which they hope to find in the next village along the way. Thankfully, Theon Greyjoy was able to make off with most of Euron Greyjoy's fleet, so the Blackwater Bay should be very quiet tonight. Their plan is to find a small fishing boat in the next village, then Arya and Jaime will slowly paddle the boat along the shore of King's Landing until they reach the storm drain right below the Red Keep. Once they enter the drain, they will make their way into the dungeons inside the Red Keep, right where the dragon skulls are located. When they get inside, they're going to split up. Jaime will immediately look for Cersei and Euron, while Arya kills the first Lannister guard she comes across inside the castle. She will then wear the Lannister guard's face and uniform, which will allow her to move freely throughout the city. Then she can go to one of the back gates, kill all the guards, then leave it open for everyone else to enter the city. After that, Arya will walk along the top of the castle walls, then wave one of the torches to give the signal that the gate is open, then begin killing as many men that are manning the ballistas as possible. Once all of the others get inside the city, they will first head to the ballistas to destroy them. Then they will give another signal, which is when Jon and Daenerys will know that it's time to attack with the dragons. Now that everyone knows the plan, Arya and Jaime begin walking down to the shoreline in search for a small boat. Jaime is first stopped by Bronn, who hands him the small dagger that's always kept tucked behind his back. He tells Jaime you will be in close quarters while inside the castle. Besides, it will be much easier for you to use that than the sword on your hip. After walking for about a mile, Arya and Jaime do come across a boat. It's secured to the dock by some old rusted chain. Arya's Valyrian steel dagger cuts right through it like butter. They quietly carry the boat down to the water, then slowly make their way to Blackwater Bay. It takes them about another hour before they land on the shore right behind the Red Keep. They don't waste any time pulling the boat onto the rocks, then dragging it into the storm drain with them so no one happens to see it. Arya hasn't been inside this drain for many years. It takes them quite some time to find their way around the sewer system. But they do finally find their way into the dungeons below the Great Hall of the Red Keep. This is where Jaime and Arya will head their separate ways. Before they do, Arya grabs Jaime by the arm before he heads in the opposite direction. Her eyes are burning a hole right through him. Arya says, "If you betray my family again, it will be your face that I'm wearing when I kill your sister." Jaime looks scared. He gives her a nod, as in he believes she will do it. It's not long before Arya slips back outside the Red Keep, only this time she's walking through the city streets. It only takes her a few moments before she comes across the first Lannister guard. She executes him immediately, then dons his face and uniform. She walks past several other guards who don't even give her a second look. This might actually work. Before the guards notice anyone is there, Arya begins cutting their throats one by one. She unlocks the gate, then heads for the top of the wall to give the others the signal. The Hound and Brienne are waiting for the signal. They see Arya waving the torch in the air. Now they know it's time to enter the city. We go back to Arya, who is now beginning to attack the men guarding each ballista. There are roughly a dozen of them spaced out on this side of the wall, so she has to take her time to avoid getting detected. One of the Lannister soldiers eventually spots a dead body laying next to a ballista. He gives his own signal to sound the alarm, which alerts the entire city. This forces Jon and Daenerys to react before all of the ballistas are even taken out. They climb on the dragons and head right for the Red Keep. Jon and Dany want to burn all the ballistas first, then blow out a section of the wall to allow the rest of their men inside. They both fly right over top of the Red Keep and begin to torch the wall that protects the inner city. Jaime Lannister can hear the chaos erupting outside, therefore he knows he doesn't have much time left. Some of the Lannister soldiers begin firing the ballistas at the dragons, but it's not easy hitting a moving target at night. Arya, who is still disguised as a guard, kills them too. Jon and Daenerys finally break through the wall with their dragons. Jon lands Rhaegal so he can help the others climb over the rubble to get inside the city. Cersei and Euron run outside onto the balcony to watch from above. Cersei's very surprised when she sees Daenerys still has 2 dragons alive. She was hoping the army of the dead would have killed her others for her. Out of an act of desperation, Cersei orders the Mountain to go outside of the Red Keep to fight. He's not to allow anyone inside. Then Cersei signals for Qyburn to go down and light the wildfire underneath the Great Hall. She knows the capital will not stand for much longer. She's not about to watch her city fall by the hands of some foreign whore and bastard from the north. Euron leaves with Qyburn to help see it through, leaving Cersei all alone in her chambers. But in reality, Euron has plans of his own. He wants to escape from the city before it falls, leaving Cersei to her own demise. Jaime Lannister watches as the Mountain walks down the stairs. He's not sure what he's doing, but he hides until he walks through the room. Jaime then begins to climb the stairs, heading for Cersei's chambers. Right as Jaime is about to come around the corner, he can hear Qyburn and Euron talking in low voices. He grabs the dagger Bronn gave him, then crouches down and waits for them to turn the corner. The Hound immediately spots his brother as he walks out the double doors. The Mountain begins walking along the top of the wall, lighting the stashes of wildfire at each post. The Hound finds his way to the top of the wall and cuts his brother off before he can light the next stash of wildfire. It's an intense stare down for a few moments, but the Hound eventually challenges his brother to 1 versus 1 combat. The Mountain sets the torch down, and the fighting begins. An epic sword fight will ensue, but the Hound is still no match for his bigger and stronger brother. After several minutes of fighting, they both end up losing their swords. A brutal fistfight begins, lasting for another several minutes. The Hound will eventually smash a pot of wildfire over his brother's helmet, completely covering him in the highly flammable substance. As the Mountain is trying to recover, the Hound grabs one of the torches from the wall and tosses it right on his brother, burning him alive inside of his heavy armor. This scene then cuts to Jaime, who lunges out from around the corner. Jaime shoves his dagger deep into Qyburn's throat, all the way down to the handle. This catches Euron off guard, but with Jaime only having one hand, he's still easily overpowered and taken to the ground. An intense struggle will last for several minutes between the two, until Jaime knocks out some of Euron's teeth with his golden hand. Euron chokes on his own blood. Jaime scrambles and takes the dagger out of Qyburn's throat, then swings it around and drives it right into Euron's chest. Jaime stands back up when he sees Euron close his eyes. He leaves the dagger in his chest, then he fixes himself and heads for Cersei's chambers. Jaime enters the room, closes the door, and he locks it behind him. Cersei cannot believe that Jaime's here. She was sure that he would have died in the north. He was the last man she was expecting to see. Cersei immediately notices the blood on Jaime's hand. She begins to cry out to him, saying how much she loves him and how glad she is to have him here. Then she begins to touch her stomach and tell Jaime how she still has his child inside of her. Jaime doesn't say anything, at first. He allows Cersei to embrace him, as his own eyes are filling up with water. He looks Cersei in the eyes and tells her that he loves her. He then gives her a kiss on the forehead as Cersei begins to cry. Cersei says, "I always knew you would come back and save me." She leans in to give him a kiss on the lips, but right before their lips are about to touch, Cersei begins gasping for air. Jaime has both hands on her throat. His left hand is squeezing as tight as he possibly can, while he pushes down to apply pressure with his golden hand. Cersei's legs begin to give out, but Jaime continues squeezing as he moves down to the floor with her. Tears start to roll down his cheek, knowing Cersei only has a few moments left. She tries gasping for breath one more time before her body stops moving. Her bloodshot eyes are fixed on Jaime still. Jaime gently sets down her head, then he moves his hand over her eyes. The scene will fade to black as Cersei's eyes close one last time. The Rains of Castamere begin to play. Back outside, there are fires all over the city. Jon and Daenerys are methodically burning the tops of the walls surrounding the Red Keep, killing any and every Lannister soldier who dared to remain outside. The remaining men of the City Watch begin to lay down their weapons. It's obvious this battle cannot be won. Cersei's city has fallen before her wildfire could be ignited. Once again, Jaime Lannister has saved King's Landing from total destruction. Jon and Daenerys land their dragons just outside of the Red Keep. The Hound, Brienne, Arya, and Tyrion Lannister are there to meet them. We see one of the Lannister banners is on fire as it falls to the ground, representing the end of House Lannister's reign in the Seven Kingdoms. Jon and Daenerys begin to climb the steps together to the Red Keep. As more and more sunlight begins to appear through the clouds, everyone can see just how much destruction has been caused to the capital. King's Landing looks like a smoking ruins. Almost everything is burned black from the dragon fire. Some of these fires can still be seen burning throughout the city. Nearly all of the Lannister soldiers are dead, and those who did survive only did because they chose to lay down their arms in the face of the dragons. The survivors are looking around the city in disbelief. Right as Jon and Daenerys reach the front doors of the Red Keep, we go back inside Cersei's chambers to see Jaime Lannister. He is still clutching Cersei's lifeless body in his arms. He continues to hold her and look at her for a few more moments. Jaime kisses Cersei one last time on the forehead, then he carries her body over to the bed. Jaime wipes the tears off his cheek and out of his eyes before he exits the room. When he does exit the room, he glances over at Qyburn's dead body laying on the floor in a pool of blood. As he walks around the corner, he is then completely shocked by what he sees next. There is more blood on the floor, but Euron Greyjoy is gone. He can see some of Euron's teeth laying there from when he knocked them out, and he can even see the dagger on the ground. Jaime has killed enough men to know that the injury to his chest should have been fatal. Someone either took his body for some reason, or Euron is still alive, and possibly even escaped the city by now. Back outside, we follow the Hound as he walks up the steps to the top of the wall. He walks over to where he last left his brother. Some of the wildfire is still burning around his body. The Hound has to cover his nose because of the stench of the burnt flesh. Most of the Mountain's armor has melted into the stone wall. There's almost nothing left of the enormous man that was once known as the Mountain that rides. Next, we see Jon and Daenerys enter the Great Hall. Jon stays by the door as Daenerys walks over to the Iron Throne. Daenerys is finally looking at the symbol of power she so desperately tried to win back in her family's name. Now the Iron Throne resides in a city that is in complete and utter ruins. Dany looks disgusted. She walks all the way up to the Iron Throne to get a closer look, but it's not long before she turns back around to head for the doors. She's lost all interest in actually sitting on the Iron Throne. Daenerys and Jon exit the room to head back outside. Jon wants to know what Daenerys will do about the Iron Throne. Daenerys says, "I want it burned. Melt down the chair. King's Landing will no longer be the capital of Westeros." I said, "I wanted to break the wheel." Well, that's exactly what I'm going to do. We have all made too many sacrifices for us to continue repeating this same vicious cycle over and over again. We will no longer have one king or queen ruling the Seven Kingdoms from that Iron Throne. Jon has a few men carry in some pots of wildfire into the throne room. After covering the throne in the flammable substance, Daenerys grabs a torch from the wall, then tosses it onto the Iron Throne. It ignites immediately, and doesn't take long before the chair begins to melt like a candle. As it melts down and turns into a puddle of liquid iron, the screen fades to black, as if the episode is ending. Several months will have went by before we enter our next scene. The sun is shining, and all of the land is beginning to look lush again. We're back in Winterfell for the first time since the Night King attacked the Stark's home. The walls have mostly crumbled to the ground. The Godswood is burnt black, with the massive weirwood tree laying on its side. Jon, Daenerys, Sansa, Arya, Bran, Gendry, Brienne, Tyrion, Jaime, and a few others walk into the courtyard. Sansa immediately says, "We need to find some builders and get them to Winterfell as soon as we can. We can't leave our home looking like this." Jon nods his head in agreement, but suddenly, everyone stops in their tracks when they hear the sound of wolves howling in the distance. Arya's eyes go wide. She isn't sure if she actually heard the sound or if it was in her head. Everyone hears it again, but this time it's much closer than before. Arya looks at Jon, then Jon points to the main gate. There is a massive pack of wolves running down the hill, heading their way. Arya has a big smile come across her face. There's no mistaking who is leading that pack. Nymeria has returned to Winterfell as well. Arya takes off running to the main gate to greet her. Jon's also smiling, but this makes him think a ghost. He hasn't seen him since the castle came under attack. Jon doesn't know if Ghost made it out alive or not. Everyone begins to go inside to gather in the main dining hall for a meeting. Daenerys Targaryen is visibly pregnant. She's actually ready to give birth any day now. In the main hall, everyone gets a chance to voice their opinion about how the Seven Kingdoms should be ran in the future. They all take votes and decide that each kingdom should be independent, with its own council to decide how their territory will be ran. There will no longer be one person deciding what's best for everyone. As of right now, most of the Seven Kingdoms are in shambles since Westeros has been at war with each other for so long. They take another vote and decide that Jon and Daenerys should oversee everything together, until Westeros is stabilized again. Kingdoms and castles need to be rebuilt. So many things will need to be done in order for Westeros to be restored to its former glory and even beyond. Everyone decides that the Night's Watch will be abolished immediately. The Night's King and his army are gone. The wildlings are nearly gone, and those who are still alive have been led into the north to live out the remainder of their lives. Since there are no more threats beyond the wall, they decide there will no longer be a use for the Night's Watch. They even decide that the wall itself should be taken down. They want the north to be wide open again. Jon and Dany both agree to this. They also decide that each major family will get to keep their ancestral homes. Gendry is legitimized and offered Storm's End. Jaime and Tyrion are both allowed to take up residence at Casterly Rock. However, they all decide to stay in Winterfell until the Stark's castle is restored. They all want to help see the Seven Kingdoms get rebuilt before they go home. Jon informs his family that he's not going to be staying in Winterfell after it's rebuilt. He will be heading south to Dragonstone with Daenerys so they can raise their child together. Jon also says he wants to marry Dany before she gives birth. He will not allow his child to become a bastard like he thought he was for so many years. Jon hopes that Sansa, Arya, and Bran will stay in Winterfell together. Bran says he can't do that. He says, "I must go to the God's Eye soon. I'm not fit to spend the rest of my life in some castle. I have to be with the weirwoods." Jon doesn't fully understand, but he doesn't say anything either. Bran is old enough to make his own decisions anyway. Jon and Daenerys decide to wed in the Godswood within a few days. Even though it has been destroyed, Daenerys says she wouldn't mind having a traditional northern wedding. Afterwards, Jon heads down into the crypts of Winterfell. It's one of the only places that was left undisturbed by the battle. This will be the first time Jon looks upon Lyanna's statue, knowing she's his mother. This will be a very emotional moment for him, not only because he finally knows who his mother is, but also because of what Ned Stark did for him. Now he knows Ned tarnished his own honor in order to keep him safe. As Jon is looking at both of their statues, he hears something moving around in the darkness. This causes him to draw his sword and take a few steps back. After staring into the darkness for several moments, Jon notices two red eyes glowing in the distance. Before he can react, the glowing red eyes move forward and leap out of the darkness at Jon. He's knocked down to the ground and showered with kisses from his beloved direwolf. Ghost has been hiding down here the entire time. After the castle was abandoned, Ghost did return home and stayed in the crypts until someone came back. Now this becomes an even bigger emotional moment for Jon. He's so happy to see that Ghost is still alive. The scene ends as we get a shot of Jon hugging Ghost in front of his mother's statue. Next, we will see a conversation between Sansa, Brienne, and Jaime Lannister. This is where Sansa will relieve Brienne of her duties. She tells Brienne she is free to go home if she would like. Brienne says, "If Jaime is staying here to help rebuild Winterfell, then I will stay and help as well." Brienne then says, "Jaime gave me this sword to help keep me safe while I went looking for you, then to keep you safe thereafter. This was your father's sword. I don't feel right holding on to it any longer. It belongs with House Stark." Jaime pulls out his sword and says, "You should take this too. Both of these swords were made from your father's. I'm no longer a competent swordsman anyway." Brienne is right. They belong with House Stark. Sansa accepts, but tells them, "As long as you're going to be here helping restore our home, hold on to them until you're done." Bran Stark is sitting out in the courtyard waiting for his family to see him off. He looks much thinner than he used to. He appears to be getting sick. Jon, Arya, and Sansa come outside to see Bran one last time. He tells them he's on his way to the God's Eye. He says he doesn't feel very well, but he should be fine when he's back with the weirwood trees. Jon has gathered a few dozen men to help escort Bran down the King's Road. This is when Arya interrupts and informs everyone that she will be leaving too. Jon and Sansa seem very surprised by the news. Jon wants to know where she's heading. Arya says, "I have to go back to Braavos." Sansa seems confused. She says, "Braavos? Why?" Arya says, "I have some unfinished business." Jon says, "Well, when are you leaving?" Arya says, "I'm leaving now. I will stay with Bran until he gets to the God's Eye, but then I'm sailing across the sea." This will be a very emotional scene as everyone says their goodbyes. Sandor Clegane is seen waiting by the main gate. Arya gives him a nod as she climbs onto her horse. It appears as if Sandor is traveling with her too, but we're not sure why. Theon and Yara both agree to stay and help, but they have decided they are going back to the Iron Islands afterwards. Ever since Jaime said Euron's body was missing from the Red Keep, they fear that Euron could show up again and try to start some kind of an uprising. Euron was badly wounded, and he no longer has the Iron Fleet, but he's still a very dangerous man. Sam and Gilly are heading back to Hornhill. Sam tells Jon him and Gilly will be getting married. He wants little Sam to have his last name. Jon and Dany both say that Sam and Gilly can return home whenever they'd like, but Sam volunteers to stay and help. The North took the most amount of damage since it was directly in the Night King's path. They could use all the help they can get. In one of the very last scenes, Daenerys goes into labor. Sam and Gilly both assist her during the process. Daenerys gives birth to a set of twins, a boy and a girl. The boy has dark hair, just like his father, and the girl has silvery blonde hair, just like her mother. They will both be given the Targaryen last name. Jon and Daenerys tell Sansa they will be leaving once she makes a full recovery. They will be living at Dragonstone together as a family. The last time we see Jon and Daenerys are down in the crypts of Winterfell. They are holding their children as they are looking at Ned and Lyanna statues, telling them about their family. In the final scene, we will see different locations around Westeros. The Last Hearth, the Carhold, and Winterfell are shown being rebuilt in the north. We will also see King's Landing getting rebuilt. We will see farmers attending to their crops. We will see livestock and fishing villages booming again. Westeros seems to be on track to being better than ever. But finally, we will see a large weirwood tree surrounded by water. This will be the largest weirwood tree we have ever seen. The features on the face that's carved into the tree look very similar to Bran's. Underneath the tree is a cave, just like the Three-Eyed Ravens, but much larger. We will follow a child of the forest deep into the cave, where we will see Bran Stark entangled into a weirwood throne. His eyes are rolled back in his head. After looking at him for a few moments, we will then follow a raven whose eyes are solid white. We will know Bran Stark is inside of the bird, as he takes it far into the north, past the wall, deep into the heart of winter. He flies the Raven into the lands of always winter. We see the ice altar where the Night King turned one of Crester's sons into a White Walker, only this time it looks much different. Now there are symbols carved into the ice, the same symbols we have seen the White Walkers leave time and time again. Right as Bran lands the Raven onto the ice altar, the ice beneath it begins to crack. This forces Bran out of the Raven and back into his own mind. Bran is gasping for breath. He looks at the Child of the Forest with complete shock. He won't have to say a word, because we will already know what this implies. There are White Walkers still sleeping under the ice. I want to thank everyone for watching. This is basically how I would have ended the series. Now, I may have done things a little differently if I had more time to write, but I still feel like this would have been a much better ending. Let me know what you think down below. I really appreciate all your support. I hope you come back for the next video. Have a great day. Bye.